on science, space, and technology will now come to order. Good morning, everyone. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. Welcome to today's hearing entitled A Review of the President's Budget Request for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, year 2027. I recognize myself now for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Just 3 weeks ago, the world watched as Artemis II lifted off from the launch pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center. Over the course of nearly 10 days, the mission carried 4 astronauts around the moon and back, taking them deeper into space than any humans had ever traveled before. I was very proud to be in Florida for this awe-inspiring launch. I was also very honored to be in Houston to welcome the crew back home. The mission was the result of years of planning and was almost flawless in its execution, maybe except for the toilet. For more than 2 decades, this committee has advocated for continuity of purpose, specifically to enable NASA to carry out programs of this size and this complexity. In February, this committee unanimously reported a bipartisan NASA reauthorization bill to the House that maintains that continuity of purpose across the agency. I look very much forward to working with Ranking Member Lofgren and our counterparts in the Senate to get a bill to the President's desk very soon. Last month, NASA hosted an event called Ignition, where the agency made several announcements regarding changes to the Artemis architecture and other agency initiatives. Among these announcements was a commitment to develop a crewed base at the moon's south pole to significantly increase the cadence of robotic lunar missions and to conduct a nuclear demonstration mission to Mars. Several of these initiatives represent an exciting future for our space program. But we would not fulfill our role as authorizers if we did not gain an understanding of the purpose and the price of such missions, as well as their impacts on other programs within the NASA portfolio. During NASA's Ignition event, the agency announced its intention to build and install a new government module on the International Space Station. It would then encourage commercial companies to attach to this new module. This is a significant departure from the commercial low Earth orbit development program that NASA has pursued to date. This new proposal must be supported by budget, technical, and policy analysis, as well as discussions with international and commercial partners. We also must understand the timeline over which this new approach will unfold and how that impacts NASA's presence in low Earth orbit. The Office of Management and Budget's proposed budget for fiscal year 2027 requests $18.8 billion for NASA, roughly a 23% cut from amounts appropriated by Congress in fiscal year 2026. Many of the proposed budget cuts were rejected by Congress previously, and I am confident that they're going to be rejected again. Both the President and Congress have provided explicit direction for NASA to undertake a range of activities, from exploration and science to aeronautics research. We must ensure that NASA is funded at a level that allows it to pursue those missions. I simply do not believe that this budget proposal is capable of supporting what President Trump himself has directed the agency to accomplish over the course of his 2 terms, nor what Congress has directed by law. To be clear, I'm a conservative Republican. I am a budget hawk. Our nation is nearly $39 trillion in debt. We must address this alarming situation, and soon. But we must be smart in how we do so. Shortchanging NASA is simply not smart. We face competition from China across all aspects of space activity. China aims to send astronauts to the lunar surface before the end of the decade. If we do not carefully address the future of NASA's activities in low Earth orbit, the Chinese space station could become the only human-tended platform. and the only option for countries seeking to collaborate on microgravity research. China also conducted several impressive science missions and plans for more. We must ask whether this proposed budget maintains United States civil and commercial space dominance, or if we risk ceding that leadership to our adversary, China. Only through Congress, our commercial space sector, and the administration working together can we ensure continued U.S. leadership in space. I look forward to learning more about the administrator's plans, including what he discussed at NASA's Ignition event last month. So I want to thank you, Mr. Administrator, for appearing before us today, and we look forward to your testimony. So now I would like to recognize the ranking member, Ms. Lofgren from California, for her opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chairman Babin, for today's hearing and the budget request for NASA. I want to give a special welcome to Administrator Isaacman, who, of course, we know is newly minted in his role for only 4 months. I really appreciate the passion and the vigor that you're bringing to your service, and I look forward to our discussion on NASA's future. With the thrilling Artemis II mission still fresh in our minds, NASA gave us a taste of an inspiring, bold, and bright future for the agency. I want to congratulate you, Administrator, and all of NASA and its industry and international partners on Artemis II's success, which was a proud and uplifting moment for America. At least from the outside, everything appeared to go smoothly, an outcome that rests on the grit, blood, sweat, and likely tears of employees, thousands of employees. These workers sacrificed attending children's birthdays, anniversaries, family vacations to put in the demanding work required to prepare Artemis II for its lunar journey, and the Exploration Ground Support Team deserves a loud shout-out and our thanks. However, on day 3 of the mission, while Integrity's crew were 99,900 statute miles from Earth, preparing for their lunar science observations, the President and Russ Vought released the Fiscal Year 2027 budget request. As the Chairman has noted, and like the 2026 request, OMB once again tries to argue that NASA and the United States will continue to lead in space and Earth science, human exploration, aeronautics, and space technology, while all but exploration would see draconian cuts. Cuts totaling $5.6 billion, or 23%, from the fiscal year 2026 enacted level is not wise. These reductions do not exactly send a welcome home message to the Artemis II crew or to the NASA workforce for that matter. The request, the 2027 request for NASA, I think was largely locked down before you, Mr. Administrator, assumed your position, but it should come as no surprise that we have concerns here in the Science Committee. Exploration would see disproportionate increases under this proposal. The rest of NASA would not. Slashing space and Earth science, aeronautics, and space technology, while our society increasingly depends on space assets and services to function, that's just not a winning strategy. After all, the aerospace and aviation industry contributed $74 billion positive manufacturing trade balance in 2024, yet the request would cut aeronautics by 35%. And attempting to zero out the Office of STEM Engagement, which is authorized in law, by the way, when we have this golden opportunity to build on the inspiration of Artemis II to engage students in STEM education and careers, that just doesn't make any sense. I fully expect, as the Chairman has mentioned, Congress to reject this request, as we did in fiscal year 2026. Yet, as our Democratic staff reported last week in great detail, NASA did not wait for Congress to act. NASA took premature and misguided actions to implement the fiscal year 2026 request before Congress acted on a full-year appropriation. I hope today's discussion reaffirms the importance of respecting Congress's role in shaping the agency's direction and abiding by the decisions that Congress makes about how appropriated funds are spent. Now, while today's hearing is primarily on the budget proposal, that's not the only question about NASA's future. In late March, Just about a month ago, NASA unveiled an extensive array of new initiatives titled Ignition to include a moon base, changes to the Artemis architecture, a potential new approach for low Earth orbit operations following the end of ISS, a series of new science initiatives, a nuclear-powered spacecraft to Mars. I hope to hear more about these activities because while they sound interesting and they sound ambitious, I'm not aware that we've yet seen the plans or cost or schedule estimates for them. They weren't included in OMB's budget request, so I'm hoping we can be further enlightened. They are an ambitious and exciting proposal. Mr. Chairman, before I yield, I would like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record our Democratic staff report.
Without objection.
I would note that all of the activities described in this report occurred before the current administrator was in his position. It was not anything that he did. And I would close with this, Mr. Chairman. As you have said yourself, you are a conservative Republican from Texas. I'm not. But we see this the same way. And I'm hopeful that we can work together and make sure that our country remains in the lead when it comes to space. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to thank the ranking member, and now let me introduce our witness today. Our witness today, of course, is our 4-month longevity, doing a great job, I think, so far, and is Mr. Jared Isaacman, our new NASA administrator. I want to thank you for joining us today, sir. And I'd like to recognize you now for a 5-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Babin, Ranking Member Lofgren, and members of the committee. I am honored to speak before you today to provide an update on the state of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration and to present the President's budget request for fiscal year 2027. Now, on July 29, 1958, NASA was created to undertake and achieve the near impossible. And on July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon, that's exactly what we did. In the decades since, American ingenuity was on display. As the shuttle program took flight, the International Space Station was constructed, and telescopes, probes, and Martian rovers were launched to help unlock the secrets of the universe. The last 2 decades are a different story. The GAO's 2025 assessment of major NASA projects identified roughly $15 billion in cost overruns since 2009. Just as an example, Dragonfly was initially proposed 6 years ago at $850 million for development. We are optimistic it will launch in 2028 at a cost of $3.4 billion. Our flagship X-plane, the X-59, was conceived 8 years ago as a $468 million program with a first flight expected in January of 2022. The program to date is close to $800 million, and first flight occurred in late 2025, only recently resuming operations. The future enhancements to the SLS rocket, referred to as Block 1B, which is a performance upgrade to co-manifest cargo that industry is already capable of supporting at lower cost, required the Mobile Launcher 2 and the Exploration Upper Stage. ML2 was awarded in 2019 on a $383 million contract for delivery in March of 2023. The ML2 program cost was on track to $1.8 billion, with years more to go. Similarly, EUS, the Exploration Upper Stage, began with a contract value of $962 million. It has grown to over $2 billion, and the Inspector General assessed SLS Block 1B would likely reach $5.7 billion. Of course, we are absolutely riding a high at this moment. The nation and the world paused as 4 brave astronauts on Artemis II flew around the moon. NASA made the headlines we were supposed to make. We showed the world the moon again, and we showed humanity Earth again. I want to congratulate the crew of Artemis II, the NASA workforce, our contractors and partners for delivering this moment and for all that will inevitably come next. As President Trump so correctly said when speaking to the crew from space, today you have made history and made all of America really proud. You really are modern-day pioneers. The pioneering spirit championed by the President has breathed new life in our country's effort to master the stars. But for all the Artemis II mission has accomplished, how we arrived at it was far from perfect, and the decisions of previous administrations that led to these deficiencies deserve some careful reflection. Almost the entirety of the SLS program is repurposed, decades-old space shuttle hardware. I certainly understand why the shuttle program was ending, and it was very important at the time to look after the industrial base. I will also say that was at a time when we did not have a geopolitical competitor challenging America in the high ground of space, but perpetuating the past does not help us realize a better future. Even after over $100 billion of taxpayer funding to date and the most recent and successful Artemis II mission, we would not have launched again until late 2028 with the aim of putting astronauts on the moon under the previous plan, a plan with no hope of achieving this national imperative. You do not fly rockets like this every 3+ years and expect success. Further, you do not make each vehicle a work of art by materially changing the configuration. You also do not build a base in orbit above the moon when the scientists, the engineers, the astronauts, and certainly the space-loving community want to be on the surface of the moon, which is already very hard to achieve. So like many, I want to see more missions of science and discovery. Under the previous administration, NASA, with the support of Congress, rightfully canceled the Mars sample return mission that was conceived to cost up to $4 billion and in just a few years ballooned to over $10 billion, with $2 billion in taxpayer funds that have already been spent. This is not good capital allocation or execution, and adding dozens of other in-formulation or life-extended science missions alongside it does not necessarily make things better. American exceptionalism is being challenged in the high ground of space. To win, we cannot establish programs that are designed to be too big to fail, but at the same time, too costly to succeed. Nor should it be throwing more money at the problem, but rather fixing the problems and concentrating resources on the mission and delivering outcomes. The President's Fiscal Year 27 budget, alongside the resources in the Working Family Tax Cut Act, focus the agency on these priorities: return to the moon, increase launch cadence, and land American astronauts on the surface by 2028, consistent with the directive laid out in Executive Order 14369, ensuring American space superiority, which was issued by President Trump last December. In parallel, build with industry a moon base. This includes landers, rovers, power and communication, tech demonstrations, so we can master the skills needed for future crewed missions to Mars, alongside all the scientific payloads those systems can carry. Ignite the orbital and lunar economy. Work alongside industry to expand commercial astronaut payload and monetization opportunities on the space station, send demand signals for landers and rovers in support of a moon base, and transition to one or multiple commercial space stations by 2030. We have already awarded private astronaut missions 5, 6, and 7 in that regard. The budget supports the Nancy Grace Roman telescope that will launch at the end of 2026 with 100 times the field of view of Hubble, 1,000 times the scan rate. We will launch Dragonfly, the nuclear-powered octocopter, to Saturn's moon of Titan in 2028, along with a nuclear power and propulsion demonstration that includes a scientific payload, bringing billions in taxpayer investments from decades of failed programs into real capability in space, and by 2030 deliver fission surface power to the moon. We do presently inhabit just one planet, and understanding Earth science is paramount. And it's paramount for agriculture, industry, and natural disaster response. We do value this science and intend to work with industry to get after this data more affordably. The President's budget supports investments in aeronautics that will advance civil, commercial, and national security aviation, especially next-generation air transportation systems for safer air traffic control. We're rebuilding core competencies at NASA, moving the work of thousands of contractors to civil servants, freeing up hundreds of millions in resources in support of NASA objectives. And inherent in everything we do at NASA is inspiration. It does not come necessarily from pamphlets or flyers, but from missions like Artemis, landing astronauts on the moon, X-planes, and breathtaking images from space telescopes and rovers, moments that inspire children to dress up as astronauts for Halloween and grow up to contribute to humankind's greatest adventure. I have communicated to the NASA workforce across every center I have visited, in town halls and in letters. If we can concentrate the resources entrusted to us on the needle-moving objectives, why we exist as an agency, while clearing away needless bureaucracy, obstacles, and policies that impede progress, and unleash the brilliant minds at NASA, then returning to the moon and building a lunar base will be pale in comparison to what we can achieve in the years ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'd like to recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Administrator Isaacman, first, very quickly, if you don't mind, when will NASA submit its fiscal year 26 spend plan to the committee?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is NASA did wrap up that process in early April, and it's with review in the administration. I'm hopeful it's presented shortly, sir.
Okay, it's impossible to fully assess this budget request without knowing, how much each program, project, and activity are going to be that we received last year, particularly given the disparity between the President's budget request and the newly proposed ignition activities.
Sure.
Okay. We just witnessed an amazing Artemis II mission. I can't. It's hard for me to even describe how proud I was of our agency, our country, and these astronauts and the entire team. Yet the administration is once again proposing transitioning away from SLS and Orion, even without alternative operational systems at this present time. The President tasked NASA with returning to the moon by 2028. If HLS and SLS and Orion commercial alternatives continue to be delayed, what are you going to be doing to ensure that you meet the President's direction? And you said recently that you'd probably be out of a job if you don't deliver, and I don't want to see that happen, Mr. Administrator. We went too long without a permanent administrator. So if you can...
Sure, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I agree with you completely. If we're going to go through the trouble of building a moon base, we better be able to send astronauts there with great frequency on it. So we have not canceled or done anything with the SLS program other than to standardize it so we can increase launch cadence. So that amazing rocket that we all just witnessed launch just weeks ago, we can see with greater frequency. So trying to, as I mentioned in my remarks, not turn each one into a work of art, because it's hard enough to do it at the current rate, standardize, launch faster. We're added a mission with SLS in 2027 to demonstrate the interoperability of the Orion spacecraft with the landers. So in 2028, we can protect for potentially 2 additional SLS launches for crewed astronauts to the surface of the moon before our arrival. We also put a demand signal out to industry for 2 different pathways so we can assure crewed access to the moon base that we are building. I have no doubt from my interactions with industry, the SLS players are all coming together, and that will likely be one of the pathways, almost assuredly Orion, as it is the only crewed vehicle that we have right now that can bring astronauts back from the moon.
Okay, I certainly hope you'll finish the second mobile launch platform as well that is nearing completion, and ensure that SLS has an upper stage to meet the 130-ton to orbit requirement directed by statute. And I look forward to hearing your backup plans to ensure that we meet the President's direction. Next, earlier this year, you announced a new workforce directive to increase NASA's internal expertise by converting thousands of technical, engineering, and operational roles from contractor positions to civil servant positions. I've seen firsthand how NASA, JSC, civil servants play such an important role in providing institutional knowledge and core capabilities. I've also seen how a robust contractor workforce, the envy of the world, quite frankly, can provide NASA with agile and cost-effective solutions to evolving NASA needs. As you implement this new workforce directive, how are you planning to balance those priorities and ensure that you don't swing the pendulum too far in one direction?
Mr. Chairman, I completely agree with you on that assessment. It takes the contributions of the civil servant workforce, our contractors, our commercial and international partners to undertake the endeavors that we are pursuing right now, like putting American astronauts back on the moon so we can stay. That said, I will say in my first month or so, when I made it a point to visit every one of the centers, hear from the workforce directly, host town halls, establish inboxes, receive feedback, I was surprised that greater than 40,000 of NASA's workforce is essentially full-time contractors. They don't support anyone else. They work exclusively for NASA. This is at an expense of over $4 billion a year to some various staffing-related agencies. And I'll tell you, so they're not doing that for free. Now, some of these roles absolutely are best served as contractors. They're outside of our core competencies, and we rely on them heavily, and we're grateful for that service. But some examples, sir, our mission control in Houston. I do think a core competency for NASA is to be able to build rockets, launch rockets, and support rockets when they're underway in space at mission control, and some engineering support staff, and that we should look for opportunities to bring them into civil service, and they welcome that. Now, I'm not making the picks here, Mr. Chairman. I'll tell you, I've delegated this down to the center directors. So those at JSC, KSC, Marshall Space Flight Center, those are the center directors, the local leadership that are determining what is our core competency that we need at NASA to ensure that we win in the high ground of space, and these are the personnel that they're identifying, sir.
Okay, I'm out of time. I have a couple more questions, and perhaps maybe later. But I'd like to go to the ranking member for her questions. We will alternate between majority and minority here. So, Ms. Lofgren, if you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony, Administrator, as well as the energy that you're bringing here to the agency, which is admired and appreciated. I want to draw your attention to an email that we put up on the screen. The Democratic staff of the committee obtained it, and it was put in our report that I sent you earlier. It's an email from the project manager of NASA's Electrified Powertrain Flight Demonstration Project, or EPFD, to the EPFD project team that was sent May 30th, 2025, obviously before you were here. You may want to, I think you've read it before, but I want to read the first 3 sentences of the email for the record because I think they tell the whole story. On the very same day that NASA's full fiscal year 2026 budget proposal was released, the project manager writes to her staff, "Dear EPFD family, I'm the bearer of sad news. The President's budget and OMB have zeroed out EPFD for fiscal year 26 and beyond. The agency has requested an orderly shutdown of the project by September 30th. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to put this email into the record.
Without objection.
Mr. Isaacman, this email is really smoking gun evidence that NASA implemented the fiscal year presidential budget request last year without congressional approval. Now, it wasn't just EPFD. It was not just the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate where EPFD was located. It happened all across NASA. Now, the timeline matters here. As I said earlier, you weren't in charge. You didn't make this decision, and I won't ask you to defend the decisions of your predecessors or discuss them. But I want to make sure that as you move forward in this agency, that you will adhere to the law, what Congress has enacted. Adhering to the proposal is not what the law requires. The law requires that NASA adhere to what Congress passes. And I think there was damage done to the agency last year that even though Congress acted to fully fund the agency, the damage was done. So can you tell us how you're going to, I know it's an awkward position as administrator, you're part of the team, the Trump team, and I understand that, I respect that, but how are we going to have confidence that you will adhere to what Congress passes, not what Russ' vote says?
Well, Congresswoman, I appreciate the question. Thank you for showing me the email. And also, I did have an opportunity to review the report as well. First, let me just say from the get-go, of course, we will always follow the law at NASA. And even if certain matters took place prior to when I was confirmed, I believe in extreme ownership. I did go and research the various positions that were taken in your report so that I could have a greater understanding of it. And what I could share with you, ma'am, with respect to this situation specifically, perhaps the project manager used some incorrect wording in the first sentence or two, is that it has been a longstanding practice at NASA to always adjust, what I would refer to as just a prioritization of resources based on the lowest of either the House, the Senate, or the PBR mark. The head of the Aeronautics Research Directorate made the call on this one, that based on a prioritization of resources, did not feel this was a program that should continue going forward. Of course, after FY26 appropriations, it was resumed, but I'll tell you, even having conversations, they did decide to revise in some respects based on the merits of this project relative to others in aeronautics, if this is something we should invest in long term. And I do think, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, there are times where NASA's capital allocation execution has not been great and hasn't served those that are, hasn't served the taxpayers well or the outcomes that we're trying to achieve within the agency.
Well, I just, as the chairman has indicated, we are unified here on both sides of the aisle in supporting the agency, but we expect a collaboration on these issues and not action that is outside of what Congress is authorizing and funding through the appropriations process. Let me just ask one other thing. The professional staff on our side of the aisle has been asking your staff which missions or projects in the budget proposal would be canceled. And we've been told that your staff, your professional staff can't tell us that. We need to know what that is because we need to understand a list of the new missions or projects that the budget request would cancel in order for us to do a full and professional analysis of that. So can we get that from your staff, please?
So, ma'am, absolutely. We're happy to make time available to review everything that's within NASA's plan. And I just make my commitment here. I am here at NASA for the mission. So if there is a program that is underperforming, not meeting expectations, or not in the best resources, I can assure you and promise you that I will over-communicate and make the case for why those resources should be spent on something else that better serves NASA's mission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time is expired.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to recognize Representative Baird from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Administrator, for being here. We appreciate you sharing the technology and the desires and the budget requests that are necessary. You know, I really think that we learn a lot from the missions that we go to Mars or the moon or whatever, because there's side benefits, and we learn about metals and all the kinds of technology that plays into the private sector. So, so we appreciate you being here.
Sir.
So I guess my first question deals with sorry about that. So in your testimony, you noted that understanding earth sciences is paramount, yet the fiscal 27 budget for the science directed that was submitted to Congress is over 50% smaller than the funding Congress enacted in 26. So can you help me and the committee understand where you expect to cut the savings or cut the cost and the savings, where they will come from within the science directed?
Yes, Congressman. So we'd be happy to review and set up a session with you or your team to go mission by mission. What I would say, generally speaking, most of the cuts related to missions that were in formulation, and that is because we believe that we are at a time now where industry is maturing capabilities. I mean, you have constellation providers that are printing off satellites these days that can incorporate new instruments that they're in the future may be a better, more affordable way to get after the data so that NASA can apply resources to initiatives like Nancy Grace Roman Telescope or Dragonfly that no one else in the world is capable of doing. So you have in-formulation missions, and then you have those that have been up for a very long time that have moved past their, or in some cases moved past their general useful life. What I can assure you, sir, there are no gaps in our earth science capabilities. I mean, I can rattle off, 10 missions, GRACE, ISAT, Landsat. You have multiple Landsats plus additional Landsats that are coming, NISAR, PACE. We are continuing to maintain a robust portfolio of earth science satellites up there to avoid a gap, but we are acknowledging that at some point in the year, in the future, there is probably a more efficient transition to commercial satellites for Earth observations and space weather, sir.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, with the increased commercialization of space activities, what role do you believe NASA should play regarding the collection and the dissemination of earth science information by the commercial providers? So how do you fit in, and how do you see that responsibility?
That's a great question, Congressman, and one that often comes up, I would say, on the broader NASA mission, which is there is always a place for NASA in this. We should constantly be recalibrating our mission to doing the near impossible, what others are incapable of doing, and freeing up what we've already mastered to industry, where competitive dynamics can improve the quality and capability of the service and ideally make it available at lower cost. And I would say, sir, we've just witnessed this on full display. You know, when you think about it, sir, 6 years ago, if we wanted to put an American astronaut in space, we had to book it through Russia. And now we've already got NASA Crew 12 up there. We just saw 3 American astronauts and Canadian astronaut go around the moon. Amazing things happen in a very short period of time when NASA's at its best. We will apply those skills to commercial providers, and we are talking to multiple through RFIs we've issued to ensure they have the capabilities to provide continuity of this earth science data where applicable, so we can free up resources to do more of what I just described.
I can certainly appreciate that not having to depend on adversaries for some of the needs that we have. I'm going to change to one more question. I got about 53 seconds, but you know, in your testimony, you mentioned that we'll be moving thousands of contractors to civil servant roles. So how many new civil servant positions do you expect to hire?
Well, sir, we have two different workforce initiatives underway right now. One is we do have, we have approximately 14,500 civil servants. We have 40 to 45,000 full-time contractors. You wouldn't notice the difference of them. They sit side by side with everybody else at all of our centers. And we are paying a premium for workforce flexibility, and we intend to exercise that flexibility at certain centers with certain core competencies to move them over for civil servant. The overall workforce size is unchanged in this. We gain some operational efficiencies, we rebuild core competencies, and we save some money along the way. Separate from that, sir, we have our pipeline. How do we bring in new talent? We have we bring on over 2,000 approximately interns a year. We take the top 1%, and then we're working with OPM on an industry exchange program to grow and elevate our talent so the next generation of engineers, pioneers, scientists grow up within the organization and contribute.
Thank you very much, and my time's out, so I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now I'd like to recognize Representative Bonamici from Oregon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Thank you so much, Administrator, for being here today. Happy Earth Day, and also congratulations on the successful and incredibly inspiring Artemis II mission. I'm going to follow up on Dr. Babin's question, or Dr. Baird's question, sorry, about the Earth Science Program, because what NASA does in space is amazing, but also significant work on the Earth as well. The Earth Science programs deliver a lot of foundational data that communities, farmers, emergency managers rely on to make decisions about wildfire risk, drought, extreme heat. And the NASA's Landsat program, it's been around since 1972. It's been a lifeline, actually, in my home state of Oregon, as the state combats increasingly frequent and intense wildfire seasons, for example. But the fiscal year 27 budget proposes to fund one final government satellite for Landsat. And then it signals a transition to a commercial model, but provides little detail about how that transition would occur. So I'm going to ask you, Administrator Isaacman, can you guarantee with this proposed phased transition to commercial? I just want to note that gaps in climate or land use data sets or barriers to access could compromise modeling and hinder response efforts. So can you guarantee that a commercialization strategy will prevent any gaps in data and public access? And also, what is NASA's contingency plan if private capabilities are delayed or if they fail to meet the standards the public depend on for extreme weather and wildfire response?
Great question, Congresswoman. Thank you. I would say guaranteed NASA. It's we often undertake incredibly challenging endeavors. I would say I have extremely high confidence in our ability to deliver on this. And let me explain, ma'am. We currently have several Landsats that are still up there now, and they are doing great work. Landsat 10, which I believe, forgive me, is somewhere in the early 2030s is when we intend to launch that program right now. So you have existing satellites, plus you have the new Landsat 10 program. So we're talking now many, many years into the future when we should be giving consideration to that transition. And that's taking place now at a time when industry capabilities are maturing extremely fast. As I pointed out, 6 years ago, our only way into space was via the Russians. Now we're on NASA Crew 12. Artemis is launching. There's constellations of communication and observation satellites, not just Starlink. You have Blue Origin, Planet, Black Sky, and all of them have reached out to us and said, give us this mandate, and we can incorporate these tools. Now, we're proceeding carefully at it. We've put RFIs out to gather the data, but I'm quite confident by the time Landsat 10 or anywhere close to it is terminating that we have the capabilities from commercial providers.
I appreciate your confidence. We've spoken a lot on this committee over the years about public-private partnerships. I just want to emphasize the importance of public access to data, how critical that is. I also want to follow up on the point that the Ranking Member Lofgren made about the proposal to eliminate NASA's Office of STEM Engagement, also serve on the Education and Workforce Committee. And this office has served as a pipeline really for the next generation of scientists and engineers for decades. And I want to explain that this, to me, raises serious concerns about support for America's future scientific workforce. And we saw how the captivation of young people and what that meant to watch the launch and the return of the astronauts, children, and future scientists around the world watching this, and how inspiring it was for them. So to me, it makes no sense to destroy a program that really would foster future science talent. So how does closing the door to aspiring scientists help NASA sustain a skilled workforce and lead the world in discovery?
Oh, Congresswoman, I would just say that that inspiration and, as a result, STEM engagement is inherent in really everything we do. To your own point, ma'am, when Artemis II launched, a human space exploration initiative, the world paused and took notice. And I do believe, you know, thanks to the good work from Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy on that, there will be more kids dressing up as astronauts for Halloween. And it's not just in human exploration, it's missions like Dragonfly and the Nancy Grace Roman Telescope. So I think it is NASA focusing on and achieving our near impossible mission that sends that powerful message of inspiration across the world that does inspire that next generation of pioneers.
I appreciate that. I also think it would send a strong message of support and inspire to maintain the office of STEM engagement. NASA's mission really does depend on world-class data and a strong prepared workforce to carry the mission forward. And in my opinion, this budget would weaken both of those in extreme weather as it worsens and NASA's scientific achievements dominate headlines. This is the wrong time to eliminate the programs that have this demonstrated success. So thank you for being here. I yield back.
Thank you.
Yields back, and now I'd like to recognize the representative from Florida, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Isaacman, the International Telecommunications Union World Radio Communication Conference is going to be in Shanghai next year. One of the agenda items pertains to the lunar communication frequencies. And can you speak to any plans to promote the adoption of the LunaNet, which is a NASA-led communication and positioning, navigation, and timing service for the lunar region at the conference?
Yes, sir, Congressman. What I would tell you is I am certainly tracking the conference in Shanghai. I understand there's going to be a delegation there that's representing United States interests. That said, I fully expect that we will be focused at NASA on actually implementing lunar communications on the surface of the moon while they're there talking about it. And I expect not only to be doing that through existing LunaNet pathways, but working with American industry and our international partners on phase 1 of the moon-based construction to test out a variety of surface and actually on-orbit communication methods to prepare for that enduring presence we're going to build on the surface of the moon.
Does holding the conference in Shanghai concern you to impose any kind of risk to the United States or NASA and their leadership team, or interest in establishing lunar communication standards?
Well, sir, I would say it would only concern me, Congressman, if we were waiting from the outcome from that conference to make our determination. Instead, we will be focusing on landing landers and rovers on the surface of the moon and already beginning experimentation for what does and doesn't work in that unique environment. So we are pressing ahead, sir. We have our mandate to get our astronauts back to the moon and to build the moon base so we can stay.
Well, how will initiatives announced during the NASA Ignition event, including Moonbase, serve as additional tools to further strengthen your position in efforts to promote U.S. norms and standards in space?
That's a great question, sir. And I think we've intentionally designed the Moonbase architecture to experiment with what does and doesn't work in the lunar environment, which is the whole phase 1, to inform subsequent phase 2 and phase 3 build out. What we're doing, Congressman, is we're actually drawing on the playbook that worked really well for NASA in the 1960s when we had Mercury before Gemini and Gemini before Apollo, and a lot more Apollo missions before we landed. This is the unknown, and we haven't been there in a long time, and we should experiment. So undertaking that effort to do lots of landings, lots of rovers, not with the expectation that everything's going to work great or to build the glass dome with the crops and Ferris wheel in it, but get things on the surface of the moon and start learning about mobility, power, communication, surface improvement, and use that to inform subsequent endeavors. I think this is the correct pathway to ensure we have a sustainable presence on the moon.
How is NASA leveraging the Artemis program and Artemis Accords as tools, kind of a soft power to position United States as a leader in space, and that reflects our values?
I really appreciate that question, Congressman. So we invited all of the Artemis Accord signatories to the ignition event, which we hosted just a week or so before the Artemis II mission itself launched. More than half of the Artemis Accord signatories were able to attend all of the international space agencies, and we told them with the sheer quantity of landers and rovers that we are going to put on the moon in the years ahead, we could raid the pantry at every NASA center for flight instruments, tech demonstrations, and scientific material, and we would have so much extra mass and volume capacity. So we challenged American industry, American university, and our international partners and said, put your teams to work on instruments and payloads, and we will incorporate them and land them on the moon. So I have no doubt right now you have students in American universities and at our international partners in the Artemis Accords that are working on hardware today that will be on the surface of the moon in the years ahead. They're all very excited to be on the moon, sir.
Thank you very much. Have no other questions. Yield back.
Gentleman yields. Now I'd like to recognize Representative Ross from North Carolina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Babin and Ranking Member Lofgren, for convening this very important hearing at this important time. And I also thank you, Administrator Isaacman, for appearing before the committee to talk about the President's budget request for NASA. As we've talked about earlier this month, we all watched history being made as astronaut Christina Koch became the first woman to fly around the moon. The Artemis II mission has ushered NASA and the American people into an exciting new era, leading the globe in discovery on the moon and deeper in space. It undoubtedly inspired countless future astronauts and scientists to picture themselves exploring the possibility of space. I'm proud to represent North Carolina's 2nd Congressional District, home to world-renowned institutions of higher education like North Carolina State University that are shaping the next generation of scientists, engineers, and astronauts like Christina. Christina, in fact, is a proud alum of NC State and began her NASA journey in 2001 as an undergraduate student. With the support of an NC space grant in undergraduate research and an undergraduate research scholarship, she was able to intern at the NASA Academy at the Goddard Space Flight Center and take an important step toward her future as a record-breaking astronaut. Based on the President's budget request for fiscal year 2027, however, as we've heard from my colleague from Oregon, the Office of STEM Engagement, the same office that supports space grants like the one Christina received, would receive no funding, cutting off young scientists from life-changing opportunities that these programs provide. Ending these grants at a time when this nation just witnessed the wonders of space will thwart the education and dreams of the next generation of scientists who could propel us to new heights and horizons. Administrator Isaacman, NASA's Office of STEM Engagement, particularly the National Space Grant College and Fellowship Project, or Space Grant, has enabled the education and careers of countless scientists, engineers, and astronauts. And you've stated that a dedicated STEM engagement program is unnecessary because if we can execute our mission and get the inspiration, the STEM education will take care of itself. I beg to differ. I would argue that we have seen these programs bridge the gap between inspiration and opportunity, particularly in North Carolina and with one of our Artemis astronauts. What do you say to young students who are thrilled about Artemis II and ask about participating in a space grant internship program like Christina Cook did, or to the next human exploration rover student who would want to pursue this kind of activity? They will be zeroed out. Their future will be zeroed out.
I appreciate the question, Congresswoman, and certainly very proud of Christina and her accomplishments on the Artemis II mission, which was outright historic, and great appreciation for the schools in North Carolina. In fact, I myself spent time at Duke for flight physiology before going to space. I would just say, ma'am, that the OSTEM budget does not encompass all of the grants or internships. In fact, through other divisions within NASA, our pathway internship programs, for example, we issue hundreds of internships every year independent of independent of the OSTEM office, and we also put out hundreds of millions of dollars in grants outside of OSTEM as well. So I agree with you that we do need to bridge the gap at times from just the pure inspiration the missions provide to get students hands-on at times. The grant program does that, and certainly our internship program do it. It's just not exclusive to OSTEM.
Well, I would say that we are at a point where STEM education is more important than it's ever been. And we are in a global race to have the best and the brightest in this country have more opportunities. So I urge you to reconsider this. And I yield back. Thank you.
Yields back. I'd like to recognize Representative Salinas. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to the wrong end of the room. Representative Begich from Alaska. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Isaacman, as we examine NASA's budget request, our national launch infrastructure is facing significant bottlenecks. Demand from commercial providers, national security payloads, and NASA's own science and exploration missions have outpaced capacity at our traditional sites on the east and west coasts. Given that reality, I want to highlight the proven capabilities of the Pacific Spaceport Complex in Alaska. Located in the high north, PSCA is positioned to deliver efficient launches into polar and sun-synchronous orbits. Additionally, it has minimal population overflight and has year-round operational potential. It already supports both liquid and solid-fueled vehicles and has demonstrated the ability to accommodate small to medium-class launches. In your view, how does NASA assess the strategic value of expanding operations at Alaska's underutilized high-latitude spaceport to relieve congestion at Cape Canaveral and Vandenberg?
Well, Congressman, I completely agree with you that I mean, we need to make the absolute most of every one of our launch complexes that are out there, including yours in Alaska right now. And to be quite honest, I think if we look at the trajectory of the commercial space industry and what's going to be necessary for the future orbital economy, science discovery, commercial applications, and national security, we may even need additional launch complexes in the future. I know we are certainly doing our part at NASA when we engage with industry that are looking for launch complexes to point them in directions where we know there's capacity.
I want to mention the outstanding work also being done at the University of Alaska system, particularly the University of Alaska in Fairbanks and in Anchorage, in partnership with NASA. Their Geophysical Institute, Poker Flats Research Range, and funded projects have delivered great research in areas including space weather, physics, Earth observation, and workforce development that all directly support NASA's science and exploration goals. My question is, do you believe NASA should leverage space grant-affiliated universities, such as the University of Alaska, to enable cost-effective science in space?
I do, Congressman. In fact, it's been a priority of mine as I take seriously every single dollar that Congress affords NASA, and I want to maximize the scientific exploration and discovery value of every cent of it. So we've taken very close look at every dollar that leaves the agency. So whether that's from small business, tech development initiatives to grants to university, with the idea of optimizing the process for speed. I don't like things taking any longer than they need to, and making sure those dollars go in line with agencies' most pressing objectives. An example up in Alaska for sure would be some of our suborbital research that goes to Aurora. We've seen some absolutely spectacular pictures, I think, over the last couple years as the sun's been angry with us. And I know Alaska contributes greatly to that scientific study. And I think it's a good example of where our grant dollars should be going.
So just one last question. Just yesterday, NASA canceled their Spaceport Operations and Center Services solicitation. NANA Regional Corporation, which is an Alaska Native corporation, expected to receive that contract, yet was notified 2 weeks before that the solicitation was canceled. And I understand the workforce directive to restore NASA's core competencies. This decision has impacted an important relationship and creates some concern for contractors. And my question is, will you commit to having your team meet with my office to discuss the cancellation letter received by NANA and discuss how best NASA can work together with NANA and other contractors going forward?
Yes, Congressman, and I would say, I mean, that if that took place yesterday, it might not have made its way to my desk yet. So I can't even say if that was directly related to the workforce initiative, though broadly, you know, even though it's the center directors that largely make the determinations of which core competencies should be rebuilt, generally speaking, I have said building rockets, launching rockets, and operations of those rockets are good areas that maybe NASA should be extremely good at in that regard. I can't say, though, that that is what's applicable to the Alaska complex, though.
Fully agree with your comment regarding core competencies. Organizations can pick one, maybe two core competencies, and the rest are not, by definition, core. So appreciate that. Look forward to the discussion and appreciate your service in this role. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
I'd like to recognize Representative Salinas from Oregon now.
Thank you, Chair Babin and Ranking Member Lofgren, and thank you, Administrator Isaacman, for being here today. Like my colleagues have already said, Artemis II was an incredible success, and I congratulate you and your partners who made this happen. However, I do share some of these concerns about the proposed budget and some of the shifting priorities at the agency. In a recent interview with Science Magazine, you stated, and this is in quotes, "We should probably do everything we possibly can to understand our home planet," which I wholeheartedly agree with. But then you went on to say that for NASA to assemble scientists and put out papers on politically charged issues, whether or not this is an impending climate catastrophe, is not helpful to the broader NASA mission. So what are politically charged science issues, and who would decide on them?
Congresswoman, I think as that conversation transpired, the point I was trying to make is it is absolutely an obligation of NASA to understand the only planet that we inhabit, and we have a lot of satellites that are capable of doing that right now, and we're ensuring continuity to continue to gather that data. And then I believe we should make that data available publicly and let the academic institutions across the nation and their scientists and subject matter experts put out the reports on those positions, as opposed to, for every administration changing, assembling a team of scientists that take their particular political view on something like climate change. Gathering the data, no question, vitally important. Making it available publicly, also very important.
Thank you. So have you, or would you get involved or issue direction on the types of papers that our NASA scientists can actually publish?
I have not taken any position, directive, written or otherwise, on what papers we should or shouldn't publish. That was my feelings that I expressed during an interview a couple months ago to the publication.
Thank you. The scientific community has consistently recommended, through the highly respected decadal survey process, that NASA pursue a balanced mission portfolio that includes large, strategic science missions, also known as flagships. Flagships are the most complex, ambitious scientific endeavors the agency pursues with transformative capabilities that advance the highest priority scientific questions. The administration's budget request abandons meaningful pursuit of future science flagships after the Roman Space Telescope launches this fall across any space or earth science discipline. That is a bleak vision of U.S. space science, and it is in direct contradiction of the National Academy's decadal surveys of NASA's authorizing statutes. You yourself said at your first Senate Commerce confirmation hearing that the agency could and should have multiple flagship science missions at once. Why now is the Trump administration abandoning flagship science missions? How will you maintain a balanced mission portfolio without them? And have you consulted with the National Academies on this topic?
So thank you for the question, Congresswoman. I'm going to have to challenge myself to be as concise as I can, because I love the subject, and I wholeheartedly believe we need more flagship science missions. In fact, as much as I would say it's good to be balanced, the reality is now, as commercial industry evolves and we have more standard bus architecture that's more affordable, more constellations, we actually probably can undertake a lot more affordable, of the lower end of the spectrum science missions, freeing up resources to do more flagship. I'm fully in support of that. The decadal process is extremely useful. I would love to recalibrate the timeframes down because I actually think, taking advantage of a very mature launch market right now, AI tools, we can actually gather the data and formulate positions on what should be subsequent missions a lot faster than the current process it is itself. So my feeling on this, with respect to the budget, is as we evaluate in-formulation missions that can be extremely costly. I mean, we spent $200 million last year on an in-formulation mission that was canceled by the previous administration. So I don't always think those are the best use of dollars. We could free up resources to undertake more decadal recommended flagship missions. And that is something I would like to be driving in that direction as much as possible. And there is another one coming after Nancy Grace. Of course, Dragonfly is very much a flagship mission set to launch in 28.
Thank you. I'm almost out of time. I yield back.
Yields back, and now I'd like to recognize Representative Van Epps from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Isaacman, for being here today. President Trump has launched America into a golden age of deep space dominance. Earlier this month, NASA's Artemis II was incredibly successful. Artemis III is slated to test our operational capabilities before the Artemis IV lunar landing mission in 2028. It's certainly an exciting time for Americans looking to the stars. We are building a moon base, moving beyond exploration to establishing a sustained lunar presence. We are transitioning to commercial space stations, fostering a vibrant space economy in low Earth orbit. We're developing advanced nuclear propulsion technologies, propelling us to Mars. As you stated, sir, the American pioneer spirit is alive and well, and the President's FY27 budget request reinforces these objectives while responsibly stewarding taxpayer dollars. A lunar base and commercial space stations opens a new world of possibilities for industry, including the collection of resources essential for American growth. Metals such as nickel and cobalt, which are critical for battery manufacturing, a growing industry in Tennessee's 7th District, in an area this committee has highlighted as a major resource gap. The moon holds helium-3, a rare form of helium that has application for space exploration and quantum technologies, another area this committee has led on. Mr. Isaacman, how does this budget request reinforce NASA's goal of a flourishing commercial ecosystem, particularly related to collecting resources critical to American supply chains?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. So I would say that you have to look at this budget and couple it with the President Trump's Working Family Tax Cut Act signature legislation, which gave the $10 billion plus up to NASA to be able to return astronauts to the moon and to build the moon base itself. That's where we're drawing on substantial resources, of which moon base objectives for sure is tech demonstration, so we can master the skills someday necessary to go to Mars. It's certainly economic as well, with in-situ resource manufacturing, that we'd be able to do those demonstrations and ideally unlock a lunar economy to fund hopefully lots of moon bases someday. And then, of course, it's scientific as well. As I mentioned, we could raid the pantry of every NASA center and we wouldn't have enough. We would have so much excess mass and volume for scientific instruments that we welcome the contributions from many. And to your point, sir, on resources and rare minerals, we also have other tools available to us that I think are exciting. For example, the America Competes Act allows NASA to put competitions out, binary outcomes, you either did it or you didn't, and receive awards for doing extraordinary things. And one area in particular that I'm looking at on that would be demonstrations of asteroid mining capabilities to bring resources back to Earth, of which, if it's achieved by industry, it would certainly justify a nice award.
Thank you. AI has been another priority for this committee. Numerous technology leaders have noted that energy is the primary bottleneck for terrestrial AI infrastructure. Last month, SpaceX filed with the FCC for authorization to launch up to 1 million satellites to operate as an orbital data center system. Other orbital compute projects like StarCloud and Google's Project Suncatcher aim to contribute to these endeavors. How does NASA plan to facilitate an orbital economy that can help realize aspirational solutions to challenging problems we face at home, such as energy constraints?
I appreciate the question, Congressman. I think it's actually vitally important for America's interest and leadership to lead the world in AI. And now I naturally understand why a lot of the big tech companies that realize the terrestrial bottlenecks to building out data centers have looked to space as an application where you can take advantage of our fusion reactor that's up there. And I fully support it. I have to say that I've pounded the table for a long time on how imperative it is for us to unlock a true orbital economy to fund the future we all want to see in space someday, because I don't think we'll have dozens of commercial space stations, space hotels, and outposts if it's perpetually funded by taxpayers. So in that respect, I wish industry the best in that pursuit, and we will do everything we can at NASA to help. Subject matter expertise on materials. We have test facilities across the nation, so when their satellites get up there, they stay intact and do not come apart in ways that could damage other satellites or potentially deny access to low Earth orbit. We have test facilities, subject matter expertise, and we will do all we can, not to mention tracking capabilities, to enable industry in this important pursuit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I'd like to recognize Ms. Gillen from New York.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, for holding this important hearing, and thank you, Administrator, for coming and visiting with us today. So like millions of Americans and the members of this committee, we were so proud watching the entire NASA team on the successful completion of the Artemis II mission, and I congratulate you and congratulate all of NASA. So I represent a district on the South Shore of Long Island in New York, and it has been proud to power America's space program. The original lunar module, Eagle, was built on Long Island, and we are home to Brookhaven National Laboratory and leading universities like Hofstra, Stony Brook, Malloy, and Adelphi. That is part of the reason why I passed an amendment to the Bipartisan NASA Reauthorization Act during this committee's markup to expand research and technology consortia like the successful Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium. So, Administrator, you have laid out ambitious plans to expand NASA's capabilities. Would you be willing to work with my office to find ways that we can strengthen the research and technology consortia regions like we have on Long Island?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I absolutely would welcome those conversations. I think it takes the contributions of the best and brightest from across the nation, even the world, to help us succeed in the undertakings that we have underway right now, like returning to the moon and building a moon base. And I absolutely have a great appreciation for the history in Long Island and Grumman. In fact, when I'm often asked the question about, do you need a NASA anymore when you have some of these industry players, I point back to we never went alone. Grumman, in fact, built the lunar module at the time, and also, I think, arguably the greatest fighter aircraft in history. So,
thank you. I appreciate that. So as you may know, the NASA Authorization Act of 2022 directed NASA to research and develop new technologies to reduce aircraft noise. This is something that I hear about quite a bit. My district on Nassau County faces unacceptable levels of noise pollution from JFK Airport and LaGuardia Airport, which are two of the busiest airports in the country. So I'm wondering if you could give us an update on how the progress is being made in those studies, provide us maybe with a report, and if you will commit to continuing NASA's cleaner, quieter airplanes research, because it would be much appreciated by folks in my district.
Yes, ma'am. So I'd say broadly in aeronautics that, somebody with decades of business background myself, I do try and scrutinize a lot of the investment that we put into, co-industry development efforts and question at times, is this something that NASA should be funding because it's it's radical evolution of airframe and propulsion design, or is this something that industry should be doing because for competitive forces this helps them sell a quieter or more efficient engine? And I think there's examples of both that I've found. Some that we absolutely should be putting more resource into, and some that I don't necessarily agree with because I don't necessarily know it funds the future in airframe and propulsion design that we should look at. But with respect to, say, if X-59 specifically, our quiet supersonic demonstrator, we've taken great action to get it in gear. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, that's a program that's nearly double its original cost estimates and had flown once when I was confirmed into this position and wasn't planning to fly again for some time as it went through maintenance, which was kind of concerning as a pilot right after its first flight. And now it's flying all the time. In fact, it was flying throughout almost the entire Artemis II operation, which I was really pleased with. So we are accelerating the timelines to get to the data that you're looking for, which is get through the envelope expansion phase, start flying over cities, measuring the sound from the sonic boom, and using that to inform future faster airframe and quieter airframe design. So that's on track right now.
Well, that's great to hear. And you mentioned throughout your testimony that about the private-public partnership and working with people in the private sector. So I have spoken to many airline. I'm on the aviation subcommittee as well. I speak to many airline industry professionals and talk about the ways we can incentivize them to develop the technology to quiet down our skies, and wondering if there is some outreach and connection between what you're doing over at NASA with the aviation sector to try to work together and take advantage of different opportunities to share research.
Yes, ma'am. So we are, I can tell you this as the big A, the first A in NASA. This is an area that I have a great appreciation for. And believe me, I want nothing more than to see the Aeronautics division inside NASA back to its what I would call its glory days of decades past, doing like almost the unimaginable, because I think in between rocket launches, a cool X-plane is a great way not only to learn, but also inspire the next generation. And I've been challenging industry. Please don't give us the proposals on how to squeak out 3% more fuel efficiency out of your 30-year-old engine. You should just do that as a good business. Bring us, the crazy designs. Talk to us about the engine that's going to ensure America is 2 generations ahead of our rivals across the Pacific, whether that's in fuel efficiency, performance, noise, airframe design, just the same. And we've got an RFI out actually right now out of our Aeronautics division, specifically challenging industry to bring us those kind of proposals so we can team up.
Excellent. Thank you. My time is expired, so I yield back. Thank you, Chairman.
Yields back, and now I'd like to recognize the representative from Florida, Mr. Herodopoulos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Administrator, thank you very much for taking the time. We're really grateful for your service. A lot on your plate before you got this job, and you're doing a heck of a job in this job. And I was honored to stand with you as we watched the Artemis II take off from Kennedy Space Center, and there you were at the landing as well. And just a tremendous success for NASA, and I realize it's a testament to the entire team at NASA for making this happen. And I think the leadership shown by our chairman as well and others, and we could not be more thrilled with what's happening in space right now. But as you know, we face a major challenge from China. And specifically, you put out some very bold idea, which is appreciated. I think the energy that I sense in talking to so many folks at Kennedy Space Center, where I represent, is not only contagious, but is growing. And it's just a thrill. Could you walk me through some of the changes as we get ready for Artemis III and some of those actions and the standardization of the SLS rocket and why you think this is the best path forward for us to win this new space race against the communist Chinese?
Well, I absolutely appreciate the question, Congressman, and I do want to talk about that competition for a second. This is not necessarily like the 1960s, where it turns out in hindsight we had almost unlimited schedule margin. No one's been back to the moon since Apollo 17, when American footprints last set foot on the moon. This is different now. I say it often that the difference between winning and losing will be measured in months, not years. And that should create a sense of urgency, and that should cause us to rethink some of our historic approaches to get extremely focused. Prior to having a geopolitical rival, I don't blame us for spreading thin at times and trying to work with everybody and try and bring goodwill around the world under our mission. But when you do have a competition, you do not want to lose. So I would say yes, we have outlined some ambitious and bold programs. That's what we should do at NASA. But most importantly, sir, I would say we've outlined achievable plans. So Artemis I flew uncrewed November 2022, didn't fly again until April 1st of 2026. That is not a good cadence for that rocket. That is a very complicated rocket, 5 prime contractors. I don't know how many subcontractors in it on decades-old designed hardware that people aren't as familiar with. You need muscle memory to do that. So our proposal coming out of it is, let's get back in the business of launching moon rockets with frequency. Let's standardize. Why would we launch this 2 times and then do a dramatic departure to the upper stage of a completely unproven piece of hardware that's, I think, $4 billion or so over budget? why don't we work with the OEM that was making it, that acknowledged there was some shortcomings here, and pick something from one of their JVs that's in production, that's got decades of flight heritage, put that on top of the rocket, standardize the launcher, launch again in 27. So we're borrowing from the playbook that worked for us in the 1960s, not jumping right from Artemis 2 around the moon, waiting 3.5 years to land on it. Launch again, rebuild muscle memory in 2027, test the interoperability of the Orion spacecraft and the landers in low Earth orbit, where if something goes wrong, you're not all the way out there 250,000 miles away. You're just a couple hours from being in the water. Learn from that, and then get incredibly good. Rebuild core competencies so we can turn that launch pad, not in years but months, so you have 2 at-bats in 2028 to make sure we get to the landing before our rival does. And in parallel, sir, we want to be on the moon, not above the moon, looking down on the Chinese. Gateway was an interesting concept in 2017 when we weren't faced with a Chinese rival that could potentially beat us back to the moon. Now we want infrastructure on the surface. We want American standards on the moon for power, for communication, for mobility and logistics, for crewed rovers, uncrewed rovers, surface improvements, and habitation. And I think working to get that infrastructure on the moon in parallel, so when our astronauts land in 2028, they can get in their rover and drive around their moon base is the ultimate priority.
And just for my quick question as well, it's not as sexy as going to the moon, but infrastructure is very important. It's the wherewithal so we can do this not only from Kennedy Space Center but other places as well. Are you open to the idea, as our previous questioner from the other side talked about, these public-private partnerships are so important, and we know we have so many infrastructure needs. If you just visit, of course, those locations, are you open to the idea of the private sector making those investments with NASA if that serves our purpose as well?
Absolutely, Congressman. I think that people often ask, what's different from the 1960s moon race versus the present, and there's certainly a lot of differences, but one of which is that the taxpayers don't have to foot the entire bill. I mean, you're talking almost 4.5% of the discretionary budget during the Apollo era. Now we're at a lot less, but you have some of the wealthiest individuals and companies in the world contributing their resources to a capability essential for American leadership in space and, frankly, for all of humankind. And if they want to come and invest in launch infrastructure that can help enable a capability critical for national security, I welcome it, because honestly, sir, if this trajectory continues, we're going to need to make use of, every inch of the land at Kennedy Space Center, Vandenberg, up in Alaska, Wallops, and who knows, in the years ahead, we might even need an entirely new set of launch complexes out there.
Well, thank you. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and thanks for your pragmatic leadership.
Thank you, sir.
The gentleman yields. They have called votes, and there are 2 votes from what I understand. So we're going to stand in recess, subject to the call of the chair. Mr. Administrator, I hope you can stick around until those 2 votes are done.
I'll be here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Great. Adjourn. Recess, rather. into order here, and I apologize for the delay, but we will get back into the questioning, and I'd like to recognize the representative from Rhode Island, Mr. Amo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership in holding today's hearing. And thank you to Administrator Isaacman for being here. I'm grateful to see you. The National Aeronautics and Space Act makes clear that NASA is a civilian agency focused on peaceful purposes for the benefit of all mankind, while the development of weapon systems belongs to the Department of Defense. But your budget includes dual use and national security activities. Quick yes or no, will you commit to keeping NASA a civil, non-military agency focused on peaceful purposes?
Yes.
Thank you. Congress has long supported NASA's pursuit of of science, exploration, aeronautics, technology, development, and education. But your budget appears to tilt science toward human exploration. Mr. Administrator, how will you ensure that NASA remains a multi-mission agency with strong, independent, and balanced investments across all mission areas?
Thank you, Congressman. I'm certainly a huge fan of science and exploration, and I do think we have a very balanced portfolio planned at NASA. Nancy Grace Roman, again, a great exploration asset, flagship mission will launch towards the end of this year, a nuclear-powered octocopter to explore Saturn's moon of Titan. These are missions that no one else in the world is capable of undertaking. I'd also say NASA's proposed budget is still greater than every other space agency's science budget in the world combined as well. I don't think we're talking about doing less. What we're trying to do is concentrate resources on the needle-moving scientific objectives that no other agency is capable of doing it, and doing it with greater frequency.
Well, and I believe we need to ensure that this budget, matches that aspiration, and so that's why this is such an important forum to make sure that we're aligned there. And you highlighted earlier that 16 days ago, 4 astronauts made history. They traveled deeper into space than any humans before them, and I like stating that fact because it's so big and bold. The Artemis II mission captured the imagination of the American people and reminded the world what American ingenuity can achieve. And importantly, you know very well that moments like that don't happen by accident. Every astronaut, every NASA engineer, scientist, and technician was once a young person inspired by space and supported along the way. And so for many, that support came from NASA's Office of STEM Engagement, which invested time and money in training the next generation. It's a pipeline, and it's a pipeline that matters. And last week, I was grateful because of your agency to bring astronaut Rajachara to meet with elementary students in Central Falls and Pawtucket, Rhode Island, as well as with college students supported by a space grant at Brown University. So from third graders to graduate students, you could see it in their eyes. It was special. Curiosity, excitement, ambition. The next generation is here, and the next generation is ready. But they need opportunity. And so we need them studying STEM today so we can power our workforce at NASA or in the commercial space industry tomorrow. That's why I have some alarm about this budget process and eliminating funding for NASA's Office of STEM Engagement. At a moment where we're asking NASA to do more to lead in space and to compete globally, we have a proposal to cut off a pipeline that makes it possible. And so this isn't the first time that President Trump has tried to cut off NASA's nose to spite its face. He's tried to run this bad play every year that he has been in office. And every time, I'm grateful that Congress has rejected it. So you know the saying, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So my question for you is, how can we ensure that the Rhode Island students who I opened the door and world of space amazement to just last week will have the opportunity to pursue careers in space if NASA defunds the Office of STEM Engagement?
Well, I appreciate the question, Congressman, and I do want to reject any notion that the President doesn't have a great appreciation for space and inspiring the next generation. He did give us the Artemis program that we witnessed Artemis II fly under, certainly the Artemis Accords that have brought over 60 nations around the world to understand and be like-minded with our approach for peaceful exploration. I would just caution against being overly focused on a specific department when the entire agency's budget directly contributes to inspiration. Launching missions like Artemis II is what's inspiring more astronauts. Photographs from James Webb, the video from Perseverance and Curiosity rovers. And please understand, sir, we have grants across the agency. We have internship programs across the agency that are funded in the President's budget request.
Well, look, what I would conclude with is inspiration is not abstract. We've got to be directed with the precious dollars that we have. I think we should be inspiring our youth, directing it very specifically in a focused way towards their engagement, towards filling these critical roles, towards meeting the aspirations that we've set. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Utah, Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Dr. Babin, our mighty committee chair. Grateful for that. And Administrator Isaacman, thank you very much for being with us today. NASA holds a lot of importance for Utah, my home state, as the home of the Northrop Grumman Promontory Facility, the Space Dynamics Lab at Utah State, among many other subcontractors that provide components to our space program. Northrop Grumman solid rocket boosters produced in Utah provided 75% of the thrust for the Space Launch System to get the Artemis II crew off the launch pad. I'm proud of that fact. We look forward to many more launches, by the way, in the coming years, and I know you do as well. You speak, Mr. Administrator, about your vision for science at NASA and doing more with less and relying on the private sector for both science and exploration. And can you provide some examples where NASA can save taxpayer dollars?
Well, Congressman, I give you one great example, which would be SR-1 Freedom, our nuclear power and propulsion demonstration. That is, and I'll note that you won't actually see direct reference to it in the FY27 PBR, and the reason why is we have had, as an agency, decades of failed nuclear power and propulsion initiatives. In fact, over $20 billion of taxpayer funds have been invested in it, and for a capability that is critically important. I mean, we are going to need fission surface power on the moon, to power in situ resource manufacturing demonstrations. We're going to need this capability on Mars someday so we can send American astronauts to Mars, bring them home safely, and certainly for great scientific missions in the outer solar system. So what are we doing? We're going back to raiding the pantries. We're getting some of that hardware that's been out, that's been invested in for decades, that's gone nowhere, has never left the lab. We're coupling it with the power propulsion element from another program that we have, and we are working with industry where applicable on things like power conversion capabilities to bring together, honestly, the 70% solution, just like the Nautilus was, which I'll point out was originally designed to be a diesel submarine, so America could finally get underway on nuclear power under the sea, and in the very near future, being very efficient with taxpayer resources, America will get underway on nuclear power in space.
Love it because, I mean, so partnering with these industry partners and making sure that we advance these efforts to have space leadership in the realm of nuclear power on the moon as well as other places, are there other ways that you see that we can partner with our industry as well as with the government facilities to make sure that that happens?
Yes, sir. Well, I would say taking advantage of industry printing off satellites right now for constellations for observation and communication is a great example of it, sir. I mean, at the time, decades past, understanding our planet, the sole planet we inhabit presently, it was very expensive. These were bespoke, multi-billion-dollar satellite efforts that were launched at more than $500 million potentially per launch. Now, you've got the healthiest launch market in the history of America's space program. I could rattle off at least a half dozen launch providers, many working on reusability to bring costs down even further, and printing off, again, satellites to be used for observation and communication. And they have come to NASA and said, please, let us incorporate some instruments for some of the Earth science missions so that we can have continuity after Landsat 10 of that data, freeing up resources so we can do more missions they are not capable of doing, like Dragonfly, like missions like Roman.
Thank you. Utah suppliers are providing the solid rocket boosters for the Space Launch System, as we've talked about, and you've committed to using SLS through Artemis 5. But beyond that, what are your plans in NASA for maintaining Americans' capability to launch astronauts to the moon and beyond?
Yes, sir. And I've said many times, America will never give up the moon again. If we're going to build a base, we're going to do so that we can send astronauts to the surface of the moon with frequency. So we have absolutely committed to using SLS through Artemis 5 as contemplated in the Working Family Tax Cut Act. But then NASA has put a demand signal out to industry and said we need two different pathways to ensure access to the moon, to ensure we never give it up again, for astronaut missions to the moon base on a cadence of every 6 months. And I have no doubt, and I've had conversations and seen the proposals and acceleration proposals as well from industry, that you're going to see the various suppliers in SLS come together. And frankly, I think at substantially lower costs as NASA looks at ways that they can be more efficient with industry and remove some of the friction and bureaucracy that have probably resulted in inflated costs over the years.
Last question. NASA's ignition plan and the President's fiscal year 27 budget both identify commercial radioisotope power, specifically heater units, in NASA's Harmonia project, and essential for surviving the lunar night and enabling missions on the moon and beyond, with demonstrations beginning as early as 28. So how will NASA collaborate with the private industry to scale up deployment of this technology to power American missions on the moon and Mars?
Yes, sir. I love this question. So right now, the RTGs that we use for power on missions like Curiosity, Perseverance, even Dragonfly mission, we get from the DOE at extraordinary expense and probably a distraction in some ways to national security mission. I welcome commercial industry being able to provide RUs and RTGs so our equipment can survive the lunar night. And in fact, we are incorporating bonus payments into the moon-based construct. This is already going out in the CLIPS program to encourage landers and rovers to partner with industry to buy what I assume is going to be probably americium-based RUs and RTGs, so we have a power source to survive the lunar night.
Thank you for those answers, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I'd like to recognize Representative Whiteside from California. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Isaacman, in your career, you have launched a space twice, performed the first private spacewalk, piloted high-performance jet aircraft, and built industry-leading companies. Now it is my pleasure to greet you for your biggest challenge yet, your first congressional budget hearing.
Yes, sir.
I was there for the launch of Artemis II, and I want to begin by congratulating the entire NASA family on this awe-inspiring mission. Much like in 1968 with Apollo 8, the country really needed this. But we have a short time to cover some key points, so let's get into it. First, let me say that I think you're doing a good job. You've brought new energy to the NASA workforce. You're rebuilding both morale and critical skills after a very difficult year. You're rightfully focused on outcomes and getting good value for government dollars. You support science, both in space and for our home planet. And while I may not agree with everything you propose, I believe you're an honest leader of good character. Thank you for stepping up to government service.
Thanks, sir.
To state the obvious, I believe OMB's budget request for NASA is dead on arrival. I have spoken to members on both sides of the aisle, and many are surprised and even offended that after Congress rejected the draconian cuts to NASA proposed for FY26, the administration would ignore clear bipartisan congressional intent and propose similar cuts again. Let me send a message to OMB Director Russ Vought. Congress will reject your misguided war on American science. My first question echoes others on this committee. Can we get your commitment today that NASA will respect appropriations law and not repeat last year's de facto implementation of proposed cuts before Congress has carried out its constitutionally mandated budget process?
Congressman, you have my commitment. We will always follow the law. But to be very honest, I do also promise to very much over-communicate with this committee and Congress when I do believe we are putting resources not in an appropriate place for good scientific or discovery return.
We certainly welcome that exchange. As an accomplished pilot yourself, you know that American leadership in aviation isn't a birthright. It's earned through constant innovation and test. Many people forget that the first A in NASA stands for Aeronautics, which, though I know you do not. I'm proud to represent many of the amazing men and women who work at Armstrong Flight Research Center. Do you believe in the importance of the aeronautics theme in NASA's congressional mission, and will you lead an ambitious vision for the aero portfolio to keep us ahead of our international competitors?
You can count on it, sir.
That's awesome. I will say that the deletion of sustainable aviation in the program at a time when aviation fuels are skyrocketing in price and avgas stocks are collapsing is short-sighted and should be reversed. I'm also proud to represent many folks who work at JPL, which borders my district to the south. JPL is a national treasure, and the cuts and layoffs it has suffered over the past 2 years have weakened our leadership in space exploration and needlessly lost hundreds of world-class engineers to the private sector, most of whom will probably never return to government service. I think that's a big loss to our nation. So I was very pleased to see JPL play a crucial role in several initiatives announced as part of your ignition efforts. I note that some of these very exciting new space exploration programs, such as Skyfall and Moonfall, do not seem to be in the President's budget request, which may be because they were developed after the FY27 budget passback from OMB happened. I look forward to working with you to help fund these missions through mechanisms that do not cannibalize existing science missions that are duly appropriated in law. One area where I think we do not yet agree is on the issue of commercial space stations. I believe that the new option for CLD as proposed at the ignition event has two central risks. First, that it will lead to an unsafe extension of ISS, and second, that such an extension of ISS will then lead to a budgetary challenge that will prevent future administrators from fulfilling an exploration agenda that meets your bold vision. Let me elaborate briefly. Realistically, I do not think that there is a way to get a new government module launched until at least earliest 2029 and more likely 2030 or later. If the point of such a module is to enable private companies to gain experience, that would seem to necessitate multiple years beyond that point. Also, several of these private companies would need to redesign their stations to fit this new concept, delaying them further. I believe that this will inevitably lead to a push to extend ISS to 2035 or even 2040. Such an extension opens risks that are both known and unknown. Known includes the risk of Zvezda unzipping. Unknown is the risk of extending U.S. hardware 10 to 20 years beyond its design lifetime. Further extending the ISS to these dates will then consume 10 to 20 billion more than the current CLD baseline over that coming decade that could be going to exploration. While I believe that your views are earnestly developed, I urge you to proceed with a plan that NASA has been following since the first Trump administration and that private companies have invested billions of dollars on. When I helped push through Commercial Crew in 2008 through 2010, we constantly heard that commercial providers weren't ready and couldn't execute. The critics were wrong, so I think we need to be bold and push forward to a new path for human spaceflight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I'd like to recognize Representative Obernolte from California for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Isaacman, thank you very much for being here. I've enjoyed the hearing. I'd like to follow up on the discussion that you were just having with my colleague from California, Mr. Whitesides. Like Congressman Whitesides, I'm a big fan of the work done at NASA's facility, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I was a Caltech alum, so I spent some time at JPL in college, but more recently, I was there watching the landing of the Perseverance rover a few years ago, and I mean, I would hope everyone would agree that they are really the class of the world when it comes to research in robotic space exploration. But like Congressman Whitesides, I was very distraught at the recent layoffs and budget cuts at JPL. And I wonder if I could ask about what your plans are for facilities like JPL. Do you think that they are going to continue, are going to have funding restored? Did you further funding cut, or something in between?
Well, thank you for the question. I have a great appreciation for the work of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and we do absolutely intend to make very good use of the expertise that's out there. As Congressman Whitesides pointed out, the Skyfall program is going to be run out of JPL. The Moonfall program, which is also quite cool. I mean, these are autonomous hopper drones that are going to be used as part of the moon-based construction, also carry scientific payload. We're also going to leverage the expertise at JPL to insert subject matter experts across other programs to ensure we get to good outcomes. When I talk about accelerating the Artemis program, NASA is never going to sit on our hands anymore and hope everybody delivers for our moon-based ambitions. We are putting brilliant minds in the supply chain, every vendor, subcontractor, and component on the critical path to drive outcomes, and I suspect JPL will play a role in that. I will say, though, that we constantly have to look at when we get things right, great, let's learn from that and apply it elsewhere. Where do we get things wrong and do it better? And, you take the Mars sample return mission, which JPL owned on that one. I mean, that program was canceled under the previous administration after, as I mentioned in my remarks, it went from $4 billion to $10 billion, and there's $2 billion of taxpayer dollars that are lost now that could have gone to good science and discovery. So there's certainly room for improvement. I will also say where an area that I think we can do better is going to be in the reimbursable work. JPL has a lot of expertise that they help across government and industry. The last administration wound down quite a bit of that, which did result in some of the layoffs. That is something I've tried to reverse course on quite quickly, not just at JPL, at other centers. Where NASA's brilliant minds can be helpful and contribute reimbursable work to supplement the budget, we should welcome those conversations.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to working with you in that respect. Also wanted to ask about NASA's Lunar Terrain Vehicle program. Obviously, that is going to be a key part of sustained service operations under the Artemis campaign. Based on your current budget request, do you believe that that program is adequately resourced to meet the goals and timelines that you have set for it?
Yes, Congressman. Not only would I say it's adequately resourced, it's back to what I would say a more achievable track. At the time I arrived, which I would say is before President Trump established the national space policy that called for building a moon base, we were going to procure one extremely expensive lunar rover as a service. put a lot of eggs in one basket when there's a lot of industry that's capable of contributing, that wants to learn and mature capabilities for a time, not just to support NASA's lunar-based requirements for logistics and crewed and uncrewed mobility, but perhaps to do autonomous science. So now we are on a path to procure lots of LTVs. We're not necessarily going right to the dream state as a service. Maybe what begins, the first 3 rovers, will look very similar to what we saw during the Apollo era, and that's fine because we haven't driven a rover on the moon in a very long time, but we'll use that to learn with industry to inform subsequent designs, and we will procure lots of rovers in the years ahead, and we are going to draw upon the resources from the Working Family Tax Cut Act, plus within our Science Technology Mission Directorate, Exploration Systems Mission Directorate line items.
We're certainly looking forward to working with you on those.
Yes, sir.
Last question in the time I have remaining. I wanted to ask about the research being done into space weather. I mean, obviously that the Artemis II mission utilized a bunch of solar observational data that came from our research community, and I'm wondering how NASA sees collaboration with the research community in terms of space weather. It's something that's been a priority for this committee.
And I certainly concur with it. So I think between the assets that we presently have available and where we can transition in the future, space weather is one that we've received a lot of feedback from industry across all the various constellation providers that they would like to be able to lean into supporting at least the collection of the data for the researchers in the years ahead, and I think that's a good thing. But there's no doubt this is imperative. Space weather impacts the decay of our satellites up there. It impacts the health of our astronauts when we send them out on deep space missions, a very different environment from the International Space Station. So in that respect, I'm obviously very, very supportive of the ongoing research in that field.
All right. Well, we look forward to working with you on that.
Yes,
My
sir.
time's expired. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields. I'd like to recognize for 5 minutes Representative Riley from New York.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome one of my constituents. Andrew just joined us. He won the Congressional App Challenge, and we were just out in the hallway brainstorming ideas for his next app. I will tell you his ideas are a lot better than mine, but welcome, Andrew. It's good to see you here. A couple of Friday nights ago, my family and I, we ordered wings and pizza from Ned's up in Cayuga Heights, gathered up on the couch, and watched the Artemis return to Earth. My boys are 6. They're about to be 6 and 3. My father-in-law is almost 80. I won't tell you how old my wife is. And as cool as it was to see those photos of Earth from the dark side of the moon and to see the fireball on re-entry into the atmosphere and see those parachutes deploy and the shuttle splash down, for me, the thing that was most special was seeing the looks on the faces of 3 generations sitting on that couch as they watched the whole thing. And it really was one of those, do you remember where you were when moments. And I got to tell you, I think we really needed it as a country. We're so divided these days. Where I come from, you're not defined by your political party or how you voted in the last election, but the algorithms that run our lives these days are built to tear us apart. And I've only been here for about a year, but I find that too often in our politics, we're pit against each other, and the folks who are rewarded tend to be the loudest and not necessarily the most thoughtful. But in that moment, that 6 minutes when our astronauts lost contact with Houston and there was literally radio silence, in that moment we were brought together as Americans, and we were truly reminded of what we can accomplish together. And you see those images of Earth from the other side of the moon, and it's so distant. But the reality is none of it would have been possible without the folks right next door, our neighbors in upstate New York. Americans went further into space than we'd ever been, but we did it because of what happened in places like Norwich, in Shenango County, population 7,000. We've got a great blues festival in the summer, a great arts festival in the fall. I spent Veterans Day there last year. We've got the classic car museum. It's a small town with a lot to offer, and it's where the Artemis mission was launched from. I know the rockets launched in Florida, but the mission starts in upstate New York, where the team at Unison in Norwich literally designed and built the ignition systems for the Artemis. You don't get 8 million pounds of thrust to launch a 6 million pound rocket stack by turning a key in your Chevy. You get it with an ignition system built by some of the most advanced cutting edge engineering and manufacturing in the history of the world, and you get that in Norwich. Lucas Miller's the lead program management specialist at Unison for the Artemis program, and he said the work his team does is mission critical because there's a lot that must happen perfectly, and if something goes wrong, it could be catastrophic. Those are his words. So you'd think he'd be pretty nervous watching the launch, but he wasn't. He said, I have full confidence in our components that they would operate as intended. We make sure everyone is on the same page 24/7, 365. And for those few moments a couple weeks ago when we sent Americans into the deepest reaches of space, we as a country were finally on the same page with each other. And I think that's about as important as anything these days. And so I want to thank and congratulate the folks at Unison in Norwich for their role in all of this and for reminding us what upstate New York manufacturing is all about. We take a lot of pride in punching a clock and making stuff, not because it's stuff we're making, but because it's really important stuff that makes the world better. And Administrator, I'd like to use my time today to just personally invite you to visit Norwich with me, to meet the team that made all of this possible and to see firsthand why we have so much pride in upstate manufacturing. Can we set up a visit?
I would welcome it, Congressman. I generally believe that if spending too much time in D.C. at the headquarters, I'm probably not doing my job appropriately. So getting out in the field where the action is something I take great interest in, and I fully expect to be doing over the next year as we start driving outcomes from our suppliers so we can launch this thing again in 27.
Terrific. Well, I'll have my folks reach out to yours, and we'll try to set it up. I agree with you. I try to spend as little time here in D.C. as possible. And I'll try to get home the second I can. So I'll be really thrilled to welcome you for a visit to Norwich. You're going to love it, I promise. I'll yield back my time. Thanks.
Gentleman yields. I'd like to recognize the representative from Georgia, Dr. McCormick.
Thank you, Dr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Administrator, I appreciate you being here. It's an exciting topic. Going to outer space is one of my favorite topics. As a matter of fact, if I ever get a chance, I know it's not unprecedented to send a congressman into space. I'm a pilot, military pilot, and a doctor. I think I could be useful to you guys, so if you ever want to consider it, just saying.
We got the application in, sir.
Done.
Can I second that? Can I second sending? I will second sending you into space.
It'll be during break. Don't get too excited.
I feel like a deal can be had here.
There you go. There's certain things I would sacrifice for, no doubt. It's interesting. We see a lot of development in schools and preparing people for jobs in NASA. Georgia Tech is one of the leading institutions with leading-edge technology, in both in engines for space as well as cyber, all kinds of things that really link with you guys. How are you preparing the battlefield for recruiting people like that? What kind of pipelines, what kind of things are you doing to facilitate NASA jobs and developing those kind of pipelines?
I appreciate the question, Congressman. And by the way, I have direct experience with the folks at GTRI from another life and understand the great capabilities that they can bring to the environment. I would just say that it all starts with missions just like Artemis II. And I understand that, for example, STEM and inspiration has come up quite a bit throughout this hearing, and in almost every example that I hear about it, I hear Artemis II referenced, and that's right. Throughout everything we do at NASA, from launching moon rockets to, again, great telescopes like Roman and rovers on another planet, that's how we get people excited. And then where do you take it from there? Well, that's where our grant portfolio comes in. And we do have a great grant portfolio that works with universities across the country. We're optimizing it to actually get the dollars out the door faster, but also to ensure it's in line with the things we need to return to the moon, build the moon base, and do the other things necessary as a component of our mission. And then we have our internship programs, of which Pathway internships, which go across all our mission directors, not only get you in as an intern, but also, as it's labeled, as a pathway into a job. At NASA. And then it goes in other ways too. We have a great partnership with OPM on NASA Force where we can work with folks from industry and academia who may not necessarily want to make a career at NASA but want to serve their country, term-based appointments, a year, 2 years, 3 years, bring their expertise in the agency, help grow our young talent, and then they go back to industry. And there's also a vice versa component where we can use as well. So takes the best and brightest across the nations, the contributions to do the near impossible. We're all about it, sir.
Can't think of a more exciting career, really. When we talk about the International Space Station, which was intended to transition towards a commercial-led model through the commercial LEO destination program, which I was really excited about, We've seen NASA, though, now commit to basically proposing a government-owned core model, which is essentially a new federal acquisition. Brings up some concerns on my behalf, because we've had a lot of great, you think about the biggest advancements in space travel and satellites and stuff like that, have been on the civilian side, where we have a lot more abundant funding, and it's a lot more accountable, and it doesn't cost the taxpayers any money, which is really important to me. What is the justification to the American taxpayer for continuing to fund government-owned capability in low Earth orbit, instead of accelerating the commercial transition?
I appreciate the question on that, Congressman. And just let me, two hats here. As a space enthusiast since kindergarten, I want nothing more than to see a world with lots of commercial space stations up there. I want my children to grow up in a world where there's lots of commercial stations, and hopefully they can actually go to them someday. That would be outstanding. As the administrator of NASA, I have an executive order from the President of the United States that calls for a transition from the International Space Station to a commercial space station by 2030. And I want to make sure that happens, because if we get that wrong, there's only one other space station up there other than the ISS, and that's the one that's owned by the Chinese right now. And we are doing everything we can to stimulate the market so that there is such time that we can fulfill this vision where NASA is one customer of many. To be clear, people brought up the idea that NASA's pivoted here. We didn't. We have two options. The original pathway, tell us how that works, which we put an RFI out, and we also suggested an alternative that allows industry to mature their capabilities over time as market demand hopefully materializes. I say this, sir, we have success stories with commercial space, no doubt. Launch, observation, communication, there's lots of it, lots of opportunities to learn, iterate, and improve your capabilities. We're talking about one space station as a service here. We want to make sure we get it right. And I'll tell you, sir, it doesn't make sense if you're traveling periodically to another town to build a home to stay in. That is not the more economic model when you can rent a room at a hotel. But those economics get challenged again when you have to rent out the entire hotel because there's no one else booking a room. And we just want to make sure we get that market right, sir.
Yeah, good analogies. With that, my time has expired. I yield.
Gentleman yields. I'd like to now recognize another gentleman from Texas, Mr. Menifee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Administrator. When I walked in, we were talking about sending members of Congress to space, so it sounds like it's been a good day thus far indeed. I want to start by saying congratulations to the Artemis II crew, to the NASA workforce, to all the contractors, the partners. What you all accomplished was extraordinary, and for a few days, the entire country stopped and looked up and wondered what could be. So congratulations. I represent Houston's 18th district, which encompasses downtown Houston, parts of northern and southern Houston. And NASA's work, driven by the Johnson Space Center, the JSC, sits right in my backyard. As we talked about earlier, that JSC supports more than 52,000 jobs and contributes over $4.7 billion to the Texas economy every year. The people who built this country's space program, they live in my district, they work in my district, and they send their kids to school in my district. So I want to make sure that we get this right. So when I hear that Artemis II succeeded, I take that personally. But when I hear that this administration wants to cut NASA's budget by 23% and slash the science budget by nearly half, I take that personally as well. We just watched 4 astronauts fly around the moon, and right in the middle of that mission, OMB dropped a budget that would terminate the very components that got them there. That is not a strategy, that is sabotage, and I think that it's positioning this agency to once again have to utter the words, Houston, we have a problem. Administrator, I believe you want NASA to succeed, and I believe you want to get to the moon and beyond, and so do I, so does this Congress, but ambition without resources is merely a press release. The administration needs to sustain and grow investment, not reduce it, and that's where my questions are focused here today. NASA terminated the electrified powertrain flight demonstration project, which was to develop and test megawatt-scale hybrid electric propulsion systems. And NASA did so before Congress ever acted. Now Congress has restored the funding, but 1 or 2 of the aircraft will never fly, and the data NASA will get from the other one is a fraction of what was planned. Houston's aerospace sector builds next-generation aviation systems, so this matters a ton to the Houston region and to my district. What is NASA doing to make sure our country doesn't fall behind other countries in hybrid election aviation because of the proposed cuts?
I appreciate the question, Congressman. I'll tell you, in aeronautics especially, as I mentioned, this is the first A, and the big A in NASA is one that I have a great appreciation for as a pilot, and would love nothing more than to see our aeronautics portfolio get back to the days of past when we had an exciting array of X-planes that were wowing the world, and fly-by-wire and thrust vectoring. And I'm working very hard with our team in doing that, to fly more often and make sure our resources go into what I think should be radical airframe and radical propulsion design, so we can fly higher and faster for civil, commercial, and even national security reasons that we've done in the past. We're working in that direction. I would say, with respect to this program specifically, and I know the Congresswoman Lofgren asked about it earlier, it's been longstanding practice inside NASA to adjust and prioritize spending to the lower of either the House, the Senate, or the President's budget request marks. And the Aeronautics Mission Directorate leadership determined this wasn't the highest priority initiative. Now, of course, with FY26 appropriations, it was continued, and I think even evolved in such a way to ensure that we do get to the correct outcome with the program. And I'll say, just with respect to the other airplanes, sir, and I might be going off memory here, but X-66, which was one of the, if I recall, electric demonstration aircraft, was terminated by NASA well prior to the PBR, because I think there was a conclusion it would not have been a safe platform to fly.
I want to pivot to the technical authority function, which at NASA was created after the Columbia disaster specifically, so engineers could raise safety concerns outside of their chain of command. The fiscal year 27 budget cuts that account by 50%, while asking for 45% of NASA's entire budget for Moon and Mars activities. How do we cut the safety checks in half while expecting the organization to still be able to operate at scale in highly complex and dangerous conditions?
I appreciate the question. Let me assure you that NASA does not underspend with respect to safety and mission assurances. The technical authorities are one pathway which I have a great appreciation for. I was able to see them on full display with respect to the review of the Starliner matter, with the evacuation from the space station when we had the Crew 11 medical situation. That was the tech authorities that were doing an outstanding job in that. But we also have a safety center. We have numerous safety and mission assurance contractors that support various centers and mission programs, not to mention the in-house workforce that's on it. I think the idea that we can optimize there for the sake of efficiency and safety can be a very real outcome here.
Thank you, Administrator. I yield back, Chairman.
Gentleman yields. I'd like to recognize another gentleman from Texas, Mr. Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, our prep was NASA heavy. I want to go back to the PBR, and I want you to help me understand, within this budget, how are you going to balance what NASA should own and control and operate, and what should be moved to a commercial model. And if you've got measurable criteria, I'd appreciate hearing that, because obviously in Texas we've got a major space operation going almost daily. And so how are you going to balance that? Because SLS and Orion, I guess, will be going away. So if you can just talk about that balance within this budget that is obviously lower.
Yes, sir. So this is a question that comes up quite a bit because we have some extremely high-profile commercial space companies, and people question from time to time, like, what is NASA's role in all this? And I say again that the nation needs NASA, the world needs NASA. What we should be doing is the near impossible, what no other government agency is capable of doing, what no company can close a business case to do, and certainly what no other nation is capable of doing. But when we do crack the code on something where NASA, this is to your, quantification component, could be one customer of many, we should ensure we hand off those capabilities to industry, where competitive forces in this nation will inevitably make the capability or service better and at lower cost. And we are seeing that play out exceptionally well in launch, observation, and communication. No doubt right now, we can launch payloads for the support of science discovery, astronauts in space, building a moon base, building an orbital economy at far lower cost today thanks to an extremely healthy commercial launch market. We're able to look at how we can do observation and communication in the future at far lower cost thanks to several companies that have that are printing off against satellites for those purposes, so we can buy services at lower cost and free up resources, again, to do the near impossible. That's why we're undertaking missions, sir, like nuclear power and propulsion, because I believe with the AI power demands here on Earth, industry should put all those efforts to meet terrestrial power requirements. Let NASA go up and do something as bold and ambitious as a nuclear-powered spaceship, figure that out, and if should there be a market where NASA is one customer of many, we hand that off to industry, and then we refocus again on the next grand endeavor, sir.
And as an example, I will point to the BRAC for military posts. Locations did that unwillingly, shall we say, to put it mildly. And yet when they privatized the bases, many of them were more successful. So in the next 5 years, obviously we're in a competition with China. What are the top 3 capabilities that you believe China could outpace us over the next 5 years? And within the context of this budget, how are you going to prioritize them? Because we got to beat China.
Well, yes, sir, and I would say that the priorities established by President Trump in the national space policy, which is where we intend to focus our resources and also try and liberate the best and brightest minds at NASA from the bureaucracy that's been slowing them down, empower them to win, are the areas that are of greatest threat, at least with respect to the peaceful exploration of science and discovery in space, meaning our number one task, return to the moon. The Chinese, their number one civil space program objective right now is to get to the moon. And as I mentioned in previous testimony, the difference in timing right now, based on publicly available schedules, is going to be measured in months, not years. The second component of our national space policy, the President said, is pick up where Apollo 17 left off, but do so to stay this time. Build an enduring presence on the moon for its scientific and economic potential. The Chinese have stated they want to build a moon base and in the same location as us. And even though the moon is very big, surface area of Africa, where we want to be is approximately the size of Washington, D.C. And we both want to be in that same spot for water ice and eternal light from crater ridges. So we need to use the resources from the Working Family Tax Cut Act to build the infrastructure there to do so.
So what are the 3 capabilities specifically that you think China could outpace us in the next 5 years? And I have 26 seconds.
Yes, sir. I don't think they will outpace us on our path, but I would say reusable heavy lift launch capabilities is a key enabler for everything we want to do in space. Certainly the landing capabilities to put mass efficiently on the moon itself, and then nuclear power and propulsion, because not only is it key for a moon base, it's key for a Martian base and exploring the outer solar system. Those are 3 focus areas.
And you can do that within this budget?
Based on the Working Family Tax Cut Act, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our witness. I'd like to focus on about 3 different things. The first is the balance of effort between just using the same old technologies, chemical rockets to low Earth orbit, versus more transformational technologies. Secondly, the fragility of the systems that we're talking about, commercial and military, that we're talking about putting into low Earth orbit and even higher orbits, and how prone they are to adversarial sabotage. And then secondly, thirdly, how you're planning to use the countries full of geniuses in a data center to really lower a lot of the mission costs. Because if you look at the Mars sample return, I'm sure if you looked at that budget, it was mostly salaries. A lot of that engineering can and will be done that way. So just start with the balance of effort. Because Artemis was inspirational, but there is nothing it did that would not be 100% understandable to Wernher von Braun. It's just, that's the reality. And we have been the reason that we gave up on Apollo is that we had hit fundamental limits of chemical rockets into low Earth orbit. There's maybe a factor of 2 from the reusable boosters and stuff that was all, I guess, conceptualized in the 1950s by NASA engineers. But that's not the factor of 10 or 100 that you need in launch cost to LEO if we're really going to move a big fraction of humanity into space. And there are these technologies like space elevators, electromagnetic launch, spin launch, them all, that we don't seem to be putting a comparable amount of effort into. And what's your thinking on that?
Well, this is a subject I would love to talk about for more than the next 3 minutes and some odd seconds. So would welcome follow-up opportunity on it. I would just say, sir, that I think in terms of at least leaving Earth's gravity well, chemical propulsion is the right approach for that, and letting industry and competition drive down costs materially as they have done is a key enabler for all we want to do. So again, whether that's science
Haven't we
discovery.
sort of hit the limit on that? I mean, it's, Elon Musk, what he did, he found that, NASA had structured itself to spread the projects artificially out into every congressional district. And he said, this is stupid, we're just going to vertically integrate. We had a robotics guy hearing just the other day where the same thing, the guy said, I want to build a large number of robots, vertically integrate, and that's the efficient way to do big projects like this.
And I would largely not disagree with you, and I think that is an important thing for everybody to realize, that when we spread out across the supply chain across the nation, it is not always the most efficient outcome or timely, and that matters in a great rivalry.
Well, that's why our military thing, F-35 is that expensive, because they come into all of our offices and say, hey, here's this little part we're building in your district.
The only thing I just say, sir, is we are still very early in rapid reusability. We haven't fully end-to-end reused a vehicle. Starship would be the first in that regard. Others are working it. So we still throw away the top half of the rocket. So the ability to drive costs down with chemical propulsion is still real. But I concur that NASA should be putting resources on the wow factor, which is why I am such a big proponent for nuclear power and propulsion to efficiently move mass and explore
But even
the
on your
outer
nuclear thing, I mean, the mission you're setting up is a bunch of Hall thruster things, not nuclear thermal, which, and Hall thrusters will never be useful to deliver men to Mars, humans to Mars, because they just don't have they have high specific impulse, but they don't have impulse, which you need for a reasonable length mission. So it's actually not going to be faster than using chemical rockets.
It may not be faster, sir, but if I may, I love the subject, I'm sorry. It actually still is very key from an enabling perspective. Nuclear electric is going to be more applicable for surface power, which you're going to need to make the propellant to bring astronauts home from Mars.
Yeah, we're talking about propulsion.
But it's going to be the same reactor design, so we're getting efficiencies out of that, sir. NTP, I don't disagree, but we got to do something with nuclear to get in that direction. If we jump right to that, which has radioactive exhaust, we'll probably want to do testing here on Earth. It's more infrastructure. I'm just saying it's a stepping stone in the direction of good, just like Nautilus might have been a 70% solution, but it created the nuclear Navy.
Okay, but some parallel effort, more parallel effort on these more transformational, like you shouldn't be doing zero on nuclear thermal, because that's the only thing that's realistically going to deliver you to Mars in some time less than most of a year. And so that it's completely obvious at the spreadsheet level that you need to do that. And so I'm sort of distressed that I'm not seeing a ramping up of efforts that will be actually transformational.
Oh, and with that, sir, I agree. And what I want to do before I ask more money from you and advocate for this in the president's budget request is I want to get nuclear out of the lab. I mean, it's $20 billion that we've wasted, dozens of failed programs. I've seen the spreadsheets on this where we haven't done anything. The last time NASA launched a nuclear reactor was 1960-something. So we got to get underway on nuclear power and propulsion, prove we can do this, a pathway for transportation, launch, regulation, get nuclear power on orbit, and then believe me, I'll be the champion, sir, for NEP, NTP, because I do think this is directionally correct for the agency.
Okay, I've got 1 second left, so yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. I'd like to recognize gentleman from Texas, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Isaacman, it's my first to be with you. It's good to see you today. My District 14 there in Texas is just south of Johnson Space Center. It is separated by a clear lake. Probably somewhere 7,000 to 8,000 employees that either work for NASA and or its subcontractors work and live and play in my district. We're glad that you're here, glad you're willing to answer questions. Kind of fascinated by the exchange between you two. We'll follow up on that later.
One of my favorite subjects.
I couldn't tell. So, I appreciate the agency taking a hard look at that workforce structure I'm describing to ensure we're operating as efficiently as possible. But I want to focus specifically on how the Workforce Directive is being and going to be implemented within the Flight Operations Directorate, commonly known as FOD. As NASA continues to execute missions like Artemis II, how are y'all, that's a Texas word, how are y'all ensuring that workforce changes do not introduce risk to the mission, execution, or crew safety, and at the same time, we don't want to do a number on those companies that have come to be the suppliers of NASA? I yield to you.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the question. I know there's been some discussion on the subject right now. Simply put, sir, at a high level, 75% of NASA's workforce is contractors, 40 to 45,000. They're not temporary. They've been there for years and decades and will continue to be there for years or decades in the future. Now, some of them may be appropriate for contractors because it's not a core competency. It's not an area that NASA needs to own and maybe clear out some of the barriers, whether it's contractual or IP or system related. And they will continue to be contractors. Some of it is a core competency, sir, and I think it would surprise many that when the astronauts come over the radio and say Houston, they're talking to a contractor, not a NASA civil servant. They share the same desks. Their badges look almost the same, but we are paying a premium to have them as contractors relative to as a civil servant. And that premium is for workforce flexibility, to be able to do the type of decisions we're talking about right now. We're not breaking glass on this. This feedback all came from the workforce. The leader of this program is a former center director from Stennis Space Flight Center. He's retiring at the end of the year, and he said he wants to do right by the NASA workforce. He's owning this. His name is John Bailey, and he's working with the center directors at JSC, KSC, Marshall, and all of our centers saying, what are your core competencies, who do you need, and do it in a thoughtful way based on the timing of these contracts. And in the process, the workforce is happier, and we're saving some money along the way. But the reason he's doing it, sir, and they're picking is so that these decisions, they know they have to live with long after I'm gone, long after the administration changes over, what's the right thing to do for NASA, and that's what they're working on, sir.
How long will that process take in your estimation?
I'm hoping by the end of the year. I think we certainly don't want this to be a distraction at all. We've got our pilot programs like Mission Control at Houston. We'd like to be civil servants because we will always have a mission control in Houston from here until the end of time. I'm sure of that, and we have some pilots at KSC for those who build our rockets and launch our rockets, sir.
So you have guidelines and guardrails to make sure that this takes place, but time frame you would extrapolate out. He's going to be through with all that 6 months, 2 years, 6 years?
Yes, sir. I would hope by the end of 2026 that this workforce conversion initiative we're at a stable place, unless there was some contractual reason why it made sense to do something in 27. But there's no job losses here. This is taking people and changing their badge. It saves the taxpayers some money on the way and does the right thing for the employee.
Will you come back to Congress before those final decisions are made and, fill us in on what your progress is and what the plans are and how close we are to the end of that?
I'm happy to keep Congress posted the whole way. I think we have some pilots that are underway now, Mission Control being an example. But I love over-communicating. I don't want to surprise anybody on this one. I think this is absolutely the right thing for taxpayers, and it's certainly the right thing for NASA, and I'll communicate as much as you need, sir.
Okay, well, if you love over-communicating, that to me, that just means you talk in your sleep. Okay. So as you may...
I got this job, sir.
So as you may already know, many colleges and universities across the country are proud members of the National Space Grant College and Fellowship Project, or a space grant, which falls under NASA Office of STEM Engagement. Specifically in my District 14, Lamar University, institutions like Lamar University are part of this esteemed group, helping to prepare the next generation of leaders in the American space enterprise. The budget request proposes eliminating funding for NASA Office of STEM Engagement. Can we fix that, do you think?
Congressman, this question's come up quite a bit, and I know everybody is focusing on a particular department, but I would encourage looking at the outcomes of what we're supposed to be doing. We have grant making at the hundreds of millions of dollars level across NASA right now. That's not going away. We have internship programs measured in the hundreds across NASA's portfolio. That's not going away, and of course, again, inspiration is inherent in every dollar you give us.
Okay, thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Now I recognize Representative Superman from Virginia. 5 minutes for his questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Isaacman, for being here today. And I actually grew up in Clear Lake next to Johnson Space Center. And, I was born and raised there, and it's a wonderful place. And it was the excitement whenever there was a mission was just amazing. And my neighbors were astronauts. And I think I've carried my love of science and innovation because of that experience growing up there. And Artemis 2 brought back a lot of those great memories. And it shows our kids, it shows our country, our world, what's possible. And so I want to thank all the men and women at NASA and you for making that happen and showing what's possible. And there's more to come, it seems. And so we're very excited, and you have a lot of support in Congress. What I would say is, one of the big reasons why this was possible was because of the Science Mission Directorate and because of our investments in science at NASA over the years. These investments don't just help with these missions, they help with everyday life back here on Earth. And so I would just love to hear from you. Would a mission like Artemis would have been possible without the sensors, the scanners, and navigation tools that were created by NASA science?
I think there's no question, Congressman, that our Science Mission Directorate contributes greatly to human space exploration, to tech development and STMD. Science is also inherent across all of our mission directorates.
Great, and today is Earth Day, and NASA, many people may not know, it contributes a lot to making sure we do the best we can for our planet, and critical weather forecasting, hurricane tracking as well, wildfire detection, which is a big issue now. Would you agree that our Science Directorate contributes to that and contributes to our well-being right here on Earth?
Of course they do, and I think this is a question, Congressman, entirely about outcomes. Can we launch flagship science missions? Can we launch Earth observation missions? Can we work with industry for Earth observation? Can we do more with the resources that are being contemplated in the President's budget request? And I would say absolutely, and I draw that based on the work that I've done understanding where our inefficiencies are, and frankly, reading the OIG and GAO reports on where we've mismanaged taxpayer dollars. So I don't think we're asking the world to live without Earth sciences. We're not asking the world to live without the next great flagship mission. We're just saying we can go about and do it with less resources, and we should be judged on outcomes.
So you think the 47% cut to the NASA's Science Mission Directorate will still yield the same results?
Well, and if I may, to give an example on that, Landsat is a great program, has existed for 4 decades. We're working on Landsat 10 right now. These are multi-billion-dollar type programs. They were designed to be very bespoke because who else was going to do it if not NASA? So the question is, in a world today where you have a thriving commercial space industry that's materially dropped the cost of launch, printing out satellites for Earth observation and communication, the technical means to incorporate some of these instruments, will they be able to do it at half the cost? I would argue probably with respect to space weather and Earth observation, the constellation providers may actually reduce cost by 80 or 90%. There are certainly efficiencies to be gained with external partnerships and certainly the way we approach things internally as well.
So you think that's one example, though. There's many things happening at the Science Mission Directorate. Do you think we can cut 50% across the board and still yield the same results or better?
Well, I mean, my commitment to Congress is to maximize the scientific value of every dollar you give us. And what I am saying is, based on our history of late, yes, we can do far more with the resources available, even a reduction in the budget to do so. And I gave examples of that. I mean, Mars sample return, geez. We threw away $2 billion. We almost could have launched another Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope with the money that the taxpayers lost on Mars sample return alone.
Okay, we have to agree to disagree. But I also wanted to ask, the President said to Artemis astronauts that we'll establish a permanent presence on the moon. I'm curious the timeline on that, and will canceling the Lunar Gateway delay that timeline?
I mean, to be very clear, and I don't think I've hidden my feelings on this, repurposing resources from Gateway absolutely accelerate America's ability to build a moon base. Gateway might have been an interesting concept in 2017. It's a different world today, and we don't want our astronauts orbiting above the moon. We want them on the surface of the moon. And by applying the resources from the Gateway program to the missions, the contracting pathways we have, like LTV, CLIPS, cargo HLS, we will be able to build infrastructure on the moon way faster than Gateway would have ever been online. We're going to start landing on the moon with cadence in the beginning of 2027. You'll see it on a near monthly cadence, sir.
And very, very quickly, you've also canceled an order for the Habitat and Logistics Outpost hardware. Do you know what will happen to that large investment that was made?
Does it happen to go by another name on that one, sir? I might have to get back to you on that.
Maybe we'll talk offline about that, but this was a pretty big investment, and Northrop Grumman is in my district. They were part of making that happen. That order is canceled.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it so? Some of the Gateway components I have in Halo. There's plenty of reports on these. I appreciate the contributions and look forward to working with them on how we can potentially repurpose hardware to surface application. I'll tell you, at Gateway program, we had the only two, outside of the PPE hardware that we're going to use for nuclear power and propulsion demonstration, the only 2 habitable volumes that were delivered, both were corroded. And that's unfortunate because it would have delayed, probably beyond 2030 the application of Gateway. And again, I don't fault at the time in 2017 was a good idea to orbit our astronauts above the moon. That was at a different time when now you have astronauts. Now you want our astronauts on the moon before our rivals capable of doing it. Not to mention for all the good science and tech demonstrations that will be applicable from having people on the moon. So I think that's an example of a program that took way too long to come to fruition, became too costly, and the hardware that was being delivered as a result was not meeting expectation.
Thank you. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative yields back. Now I'd like to, let's see. Representative Sykes from Ohio, you have 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman Babin. I appreciate you being here, Administrator. And just a few weeks ago, led by Chair Babin, my colleagues and I were down in Cape Canaveral and had the opportunity to see the Artemis II launch. And it was nothing short of extraordinary and American exceptionalism on full display. And for many years at NASA, this successful mission represented a culmination of many, many years of hard work. This includes the team at Ohio's NASA Glenn Research Center, who ensured that the Orion spacecraft European system worked alongside the American technology. And while in space, astronaut, the commander, Reed Wiseman, thanked NASA Glenn by stating, "This vehicle powered us and propelled us from the Earth to the moon and back with extreme precision, and we are excited to be a part of your team." You have all heard me say that the road to the moon and Mars runs through Ohio, and I am so very proud that Ohio was recognized on their way back from the moon. I sent my family a few pictures of me at the launch, and my mother said that she hadn't seen me that excited since I was a child. And so I can't say that I wasn't disappointed that while the president celebrated the Artemis launch, he then announced a 23% budget cut. And as the kids would say, that's diabolical. So, Administrator, the Aviation Administration is one of the few to enjoy positive trade balance, and in Ohio, we rely very heavily on it. The capabilities at NASA is certainly are key to maintaining that part of our economy, in our state. And in fact, 1/3 of NASA's funding in Ohio comes from aeronautics. So why then is the administration proposing to pull away from aeronautics even further, reducing the budget by about 1/3 or ending or dramatically descoping much needed development programs?
Well, Congresswoman, I appreciate the question, and obviously I very much support the President, his goal to more efficiently allocate resources within NASA, because frankly there are a lot of examples of where we have not done a good job for the taxpayers on allocating resources and delivering outcomes. And again, as a pilot and somebody that should be extremely excited about the Aeronautics division, we have examples where we have exceeded costs by nearly double on some of our X-planes. We've had programs we've committed hundreds of millions to, only to have industry walk away and say it turned out it wasn't a very good idea. All that said, I'll tell you, my goal is to deliver outcomes. It's to drive good execution, and I have no doubt Glenn is going to play a huge part of it, not just for the wind tunnels that are being done there, but nuclear power and propulsion at NASA is going to run through both Marshall Space Flight Center and Glenn. They have the expertise and the test centers to be able to enable the next giant leap capabilities we're going to need for lunar surface power, for power on Mars someday, and to explore the outer solar system.
So I hear and understand what you're saying, and we all want you to be mindful of how you're spending, but what do you say to people in Ohio when you're cutting resources that account for 1/3 of the budget? Aviation is incredibly important to our economy. So are you saying that the President and NASA they're perfectly fine with Ohioans being out of a job or without opportunities because you want to rearrange things here in D.C.?
I think what we are asking the American taxpayers and those around all of our centers is to judge us based on our outcomes and not how quickly we can spend money.
So what about the outcomes of people losing their jobs?
No, I think the idea is if you can apply those resources correctly, we can demonstrate things. Like, again, nuclear power and propulsion is incredibly important to Glenn.
Well, I think that we demonstrated some things, especially in Ohio, when you have Commander Wiseman thanking NASA Glenn for their work. And in addition to what you are doing, you're outsourcing contractors, including those at NASA Glenn, and some folks have been laid off. So again, I ask the question to you, as my constituents are trying to figure out how to make ends meet and how they're going to participate in our local economy. What is your statement to them when you're cutting budgets will put them out of a job?
My statement to Glenn, as it would be to any other of the centers, is that we are going to focus on efficient use of taxpayer dollars to drive the outcomes that get people excited, like Artemis II, and nuclear missions like Freedom that will go through, Glenn.
So it sounds like some of those outcomes may mean joblessness for Ohioans, but I do want to ask you another question. Do you intend to cancel or shut down any missions or projects because they did not receive the proposed funding in fiscal year 27?
Well, I would tell you, as of now, we haven't canceled any programs that are under FY26 appropriations.
I'm talking about 27.
I would tell you that right now our goal is to concentrate our resources on the needle-moving objectives in line with the President's national space policy.
So is that a yes? That is a yes?
I can't think of anything at Glenn that would be canceled. If anything, we are trying to build a nuclear program.
I didn't ask just about Glenn. I said generally.
Are there, I mean, for sure, within, people have brought up or naturally asked questions about SMD. We have a number of in-formulation science programs that have not been launched yet that we're looking at other ways to go about doing it, including buying services from orbiting constellations for space weather and Earth observation data.
Thank you very much.
Time's expired.
I'm out of time, and I yield back. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Representative Rivas from California. 5 minutes.
Thank you. Administrator Isaacman, thank you for visiting NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratories soon after your confirmation. While this is outside of my district, the facility employs many of my constituents who really appreciated your time there. With the recent Artemis II mission, people are once again excited about going to the moon, exploring space, and learning about NASA. NASA and its work continues to be an inspiration for Americans of all ages. Kids were able to see astronauts who looked like them with a diverse crew, and I was excited to see a woman on the crew as well. However, the Trump budget proposal is missing the significance of this moment. It will set our future NASA workforce back, especially a diverse workforce. If the president's budget becomes a reality, our country's future NASA STEM workforce and educational opportunities will be depleted, and space exploration will remain just a dream for many. While inspiration is important, it's not enough. Our children need to have the skills, the tools, and opportunities available to take the hope that they have and make it a reality. Administrator, as you may know, the Trump administration has proposed eliminating the Office of STEM Engagement, which includes the minority university research and education projects and other vital initiatives that serve to give the skills, provide skills and tools training for many young people. On a bipartisan basis, Congress has rejected these proposed cuts. In fact, the Office of STEM Engagement was specifically authorized in statute in 2022. Can you explain why President Trump's fiscal year 27 request again calls for the elimination of the Office of STEM Engagement?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I very much enjoyed JPL, and I have no doubt the experts there will continue to contribute to a lot of exciting scientific missions. In fact, we got a bunch that are on the horizon. I do support the president asking us to find efficiencies, be better allocators of taxpayer capital, and deliver good scientific and discovery outcomes. And I think the president understands, again, that inspiration is inherent across every dollar that Congress affords to us. In fact, even sitting here today, every example I've heard of from members of Congress about their enthusiasm, and excitement, and their children watching on the TV was Artemis II. And that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing by focusing on the mission, by getting astronauts back to the surface of the moon, building a moon base that can be viewed on a website through orbital observation assets is exactly how you get children to want to grow up and join this great adventure. And we do have internship programs, and we do have hundreds of millions in grant programs throughout NASA, independent of the OSTEM office.
But I think those STEM programs provide the addition. They get inspired, and then they get the hands-on skills that they need to enter that workforce. And by eliminating, you're kind of part of the puzzle is being removed?
And I think, ma'am, I think it's just and I understand when the title of the department is, is about STEM education, that the assumption is it's binary. If it doesn't exist, that all goes away. But I can tell you within what that
Where
department
will it go
does,
then if it's not all going away?
But it's already there. So literally hundreds of internships, pathway internships, are funded independent of that office through all of our mission directorates, and hundreds of millions a year in grants that go to universities to take kids from the inspiration they got from our missions to like a career, whether it's at NASA or industry, exist independent of that office.
But what's in that? Why eliminate that office then? If there's programs there that could further inspire, how are you going to get the students in those internships if they're missing that crucial part of their education that would get them to apply? To apply for an internship, it's very competitive. You have to be prepared. Yeah.
And I agree with you. It is very competitive. And I think the reason why we've been asked to take a look at this in other areas is because they know there is duplicative functions, that our grant portfolio exists independent of this, and our internship programs that, in fact, the pathway program specifically that allows you to apply as an intern and then more or less guarantees you a career period.
Also, this office is in the law, right? And you're proposing to eliminate it. The administration, it's in statute that we passed here in 2022.
And we didn't cancel it. The office is funded under FY26 appropriations, and I interact with the leader of that department routinely on this, and we will always follow the law. That's not changing. We're just pointing out that
but following the law is keeping this office and its programs available to all, right?
And the office is open, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Representative yields back. Representative McBride from Delaware, 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Administrator Isaacman, for joining us today, for bearing with us as we get down to the lower part of the dais. Building off of some of your comments earlier and some of the comments of my colleagues, earlier this month, I, like so many people across the United States and around the world, stared at my screen in wonder watching those 4 astronauts take off, fly by the moon, and then eventually splash down in the Pacific. In fact, my lock screen on my iPhone is one of my favorite pictures, where you can see the Orion capsule, the moon, and our little crescent that we call home beyond that. And to some of the points that you were making earlier, moments like this are not only scientifically significant, they're civically healing. It's truly a national accomplishment and a global event, and it's, in my mind, an antidote to the division that seems to define our age. And moments like this seem to come just when we need them most. I think it's no coincidence that in the 1960s, an era marked by chaos and conflict, we dreamed of and reached the moon. And actually 65 years ago this May, President Kennedy spoke words that ring just as true today when he declared, quote, "If we are to win the battle that is now going on around the world between freedom and tyranny, the dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to us all the impact of this adventure on the minds of people everywhere who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take." He actually said those words to our chamber, to Congress, as he asked this body to appropriate the necessary funds for us to not only go to the moon, but to achieve all of NASA's goals. He came to Congress, Congress appropriated, NASA executed, and Congress provided oversight. And that's obviously why we're here today, 65 years later. Unfortunately, that constitutional obligation is undermined when the administration fails to or is incredibly delayed in providing us with the information necessary, information that we are legally entitled to perform that oversight role. And I know we've talked a little bit about this already, but this committee didn't receive NASA's FY 2025 spend plan until mid-March 2026, 6 months after the year in question ended, and much, much, much further beyond the legally determined deadline for that information. And this was despite repeated efforts by committee members, by staff, for basic information about how NASA is spending appropriated money. The FY 2026 spend plan is well overdue, as has been talked about. Earlier, you told the chairman that the process for compiling the spend plan was wrapped in early April and hopefully will be released shortly. Can you commit to providing the FY 2026 spend plan to this committee within the next 10 days?
Congresswoman, I can tell you that for the part that NASA plays in this, we have completed our effort as of early April. Like a lot of things, it makes its way through the various administrative process, and I'm hopeful it is released to you within that time frame. I'm not aware of anything that's still up for discussion in it. You certainly have my commitment. I understand with respect to FY25. I was confirmed in late December on that one. I tried to make that a priority to turn it around as quickly as we can. I'm hopeful now that we'll be able to get into a more, we'll be able to adhere to our schedules better. And I also would happily make myself available, as I said to all the members of the committee. I enjoy over-communicating and bringing people together to do really challenging things like we do at NASA, and we'll share as much about our plans and spending as possible.
Great. Well, it is already 45 days, or it's required to be submitted to us within 45 days of enactment of the appropriations bill. It was due in February 2026. I recognize that there are other people in the administration that are reviewing. One thing I hope that you will successfully be able to do is manage up and around throughout the administration to get this to us, because that information is incredibly helpful as we perform oversight in the aftermath of the appropriations bill going into effect. And I know that you are eager to get us that information. I hope that you're able to help the rest of your administration get it to us in a timely fashion. I also just want to quickly ask, the big advancements we see from NASA come from a collaborative process across administrations and, of course, in collaboration with the scientific community. And the National Academy's decadal survey process is a critical part of informing NASA's priorities. And so I'm curious, in determining which science missions and projects to propose to cancel within the President's recommended budget, to what extent did NASA consider the effect that their cancellation would have on advancing the scientific priorities outlined in those decadal surveys?
Well, it's an interesting question. I understand we have limited time. I will tell you that I am hopeful, since my understanding of most of the programs that were, that are being considered for cancellation, they haven't been canceled yet, are in formulation scientific endeavors and do not measure up to the flagship programs that we tend to coordinate closely on with respect to the decadal survey, or their missions that have long passed their original life, of which we are working on ways to consolidate efforts to continue to yield good science, that requires little dollars in order to do so, with the aim of launching more flagship missions in the future, and hopefully at greater frequency than the current decadal survey process affords.
Thank you. I yield back.
Representative McLean Delaney from Maryland, please. 5 minutes.
Thank you to our chair and our ranking member. I really appreciate this hearing. It is incredible to me, and thank you, Administrator Isaacman, for joining us today. It's nice to see you again. I think I met you in Greenbelt. And in fact, my home state of Maryland, I represent Maryland's 6th Congressional District, is a major player in the aerospace industry. In fact, early in my legal career in the 1990s, I worked in Rockville at Orion Satellite, which was the first separate system in the private sector. Did a lot of innovation. But I also deeply believe that we always need to have government funding in foundational research, in our weather satellites at NOAA, and most especially in NASA projects, so that the fruits of these endeavors might be shared by all of our citizens and for the public interest. And we need a vibrant ecosystem for research. And to that note, thanks to the expert scientists, engineers, technicians, and other staff at Goddard Space Flight Center, Goddard employees, Hopkins researchers, and others have created an incredibly robust ecosystem of research projects and companies driving unbelievable innovation. Goddard is also the home of the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, which I saw when I was there, and a project which is both ahead of schedule and under budget. Kudos. Really incredible. I'm looking forward to the upcoming launch. But for more than 65 years, Goddard has been America's preeminent hub for scientific research in space. It's also foundational to NASA science. You cannot separate the two. The beating heart of Goddard in science and the beating heart of NASA science is Goddard. But I'm concerned about Goddard's future. We're hearing credible reports and seeing written information that Goddard leadership is telling employees and making decisions based on Goddard only doing work in national security, planetary defense, and moon to Mars. there's something conspicuously missing from these categories, and being on SST, I want to hear your vision for Goddard's science as we look forward to funding NASA. I just want to ask you, Administrator, do you believe that Goddard should remain America's preeminent center for scientific research in space and continue carrying out groundbreaking scientific missions for NASA?
I do, Congresswoman. In fact, I'm looking at every one of our centers and saying, what is the ultimate specialization here? And let's declare it a center of excellence and make sure we resource it accordingly to do so. I think JPL is a great example for deep space science and robotics. I think Johnson Space Center is our human spaceflight center of excellence. I think Goddard Space Flight Center is a science center of excellence. Everything from Earth to near Earth to heliophysics, not to mention actually has a lot of exciting, like astrophysics with Roman Space Telescope and Dragonfly as a planetary science mission.
If I can just go in, and because I hear that, but for months our Maryland delegation and our whole delegation has been asking this straightforward question: which facilities or missions at Goddard are proposed for either consolidation or closure? And despite communication between our delegation and center leadership, I remain concerned about the future of the workforce, particularly something called the deprioritization of habitable worlds. The FY27 budget is vague, and it omits the center-level workforce. So first, will you commit now to ensuring a robust program at Goddard that fully leverages the technical capabilities of its workforce, including maybe moving forward with habitable worlds? And is there can we have improved communication with respect to Goddard's future for both the civil servants while Congress is completing its FY27 work bill and as we are just looking at the assessments generally? It's really important for research.
Yes, Congressman, and I say several times today about over communicating. I will happily ensure that every member of this committee has my cell phone so we can have these conversations as often as it likes.
I'll definitely take it.
I'm here for the mission. I'll learn to sleep and eat another time. And I would say in terms of Goddard Space Flight Center specifically, I'm looking for opportunities of where we might have programs that are out in bespoke programs at different parts of the country. We can consolidate into Goddard, not from centers, but individual operations. So you could have maybe a ongoing science operations center to continue to yield good science out of missions that are past their initial design life. I look at the president's budget request as the administrator of NASA as an opportunity to find inefficiencies where there's been some waste or even in some cases abuse that's out there, to unlock resources to do more of the science and discovery that gets people excited, especially the work that's done at Goddard.
I just hope to get some details further so we can know for these workforce. Thank you. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Representative from New York, Representative Friedman.
California.
California, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Quite all right. Thank you, Chair Babin, and to the Administrator Isaacman for being here today. I represented JPL when I was in the California legislature, and they're just outside of my congressional district. They have over 5,000 scientists at that facility, many of whom live in my district. But even more importantly, the work that they do around earth science is crucially important to California. They do everything from weather monitoring in an area that is very susceptible to extreme weather events, to ocean temperature monitoring, to looking at the effect of climate change in California, to methane monitoring. That was instrumental in finding the terrible leak at Aliso Canyon several years ago. Now, we have seen this administration constantly try to roll back JPL's work on those very crucial areas, crucial to wildfire resiliency, crucial to the lives of people, not future people in space, but people right here on Earth. And that is a huge threat to Californian safety. Now, you have contended that we can cut half of NASA's budget and still retain all of these crucial programs. And so I am very curious about how you are intending to do that. I am wondering if you can give me 5 examples of how we can continue all of those important programs, all the programs that impact wildfire, all the programs that impact climate, all the programs that impact weather predictions, how you can cut half of those budgets and still maintain the full force of those programs. Can you give 5 examples of the kind of waste, fraud, and abuse that you might be able to find while not cutting those programs for Californians?
Sure, Congresswoman. Forgive me, I probably can give quite a few on the subject. And believe me, not every. I wouldn't characterize everything as fraud, waste, and abuse. There's certainly some examples you find at times. There's just inefficient use of capital. I mean, for example, $2 billion lost on Mars sample return. We spent $200 million keeping Mars sample return, even though the previous administration canceled it in a state of formulation last year. Most of the reductions that are proposed under the FY27 budget are a reduction of in-formulation missions, those that have not launched or those that have been up for decades, where we probably have opportunities to consolidate and continue to yield good science at lower cost to fund more of the things we need to do. We are not accepting any gaps in Earth sciences. So whether NISAR, PACE, we have on-orbit assets for that, Landsat that are up there to do so, and we have a plan in the 2030s when those existing assets may exceed their useful life to make a transition over to commercial industry. We are not giving up on wildfires. I went and had a chance to speak to the researchers of that between Ames and those contributing at JPL to make sure we can get an autonomous wildfire detection, leveraging on-orbit assets, drones, communications. Like, I do care about all these. As I said, from my perspective, the President's budget request is a challenge to me as the administrator to find where we have inefficient use of resources to focus on the things that we are supposed to be doing as an agency.
So speaking of privatization, right now NASA employs scientists that are extremely valuable to us from a national security perspective, from many other perspectives. But a lot of times this privatization results in layoffs, and we've seen it at JPL with mass layoffs over the last few years. Many of those scientists are leaving the country and going to bring their talents overseas. How does laying off government scientists help the United States? And how do you prevent, in your privatization efforts, from for-profit companies that are not accountable to the public in the same way that public employees are? How are you good stewards of public money if portions of that are going into the profits of large companies?
Well, it's interesting you say that. First, to be clear, I'm very rarely like a binary black or white thinker. I'm a make nuance great again kind of guy. And it's funny because I'm getting in trouble for insourcing and bringing back a lot of workforce from the private sector and the other areas. And that's because it's just not black and white. There are examples where industry has the capabilities that we can procure services at far lower cost when you have thousands of constellation satellites up there for Earth observation. Then there's examples where we should be doing things no one else is capable of doing with you. And Congresswoman, I actually agree with you. I had a chance to look at why there were some layoffs, which I would mind you were actually from the prior administration at JPL, and it was because we turned off reimbursable. The previous administration had strong views that JPL should not support other government agencies and stop doing that work. And as a result, they had to lay off a lot of talent there that could be helping other government agencies on some very exquisite scientific work. I've turned that back on to prevent those kind of layoffs because that is the kind of thing that NASA expertise should be applied for.
Thank you, and I'm glad to hear that. And let me ask one last question. Congress passed on a bipartisan basis a funding package for NASA earlier this year that set specific funding levels for NASA. Will you commit today on the record that you've instructed each of your division directors to spend at their specific division funding levels as set by Congress as it appeared in the appropriations table reports? And are you executing the 2026 budget at the funding levels and in the manner Congress intended? And will you apply that same standard with whatever 2027 bill Congress approves?
You can count on me, Congresswoman, that we will always follow the law.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. This wraps up our hearing today. And Mr. Administrator, I want to thank you so very much for being here and also for suspending while we voted. I think we've learned a lot today, and we will digest this. And the record will remain open for 10 days for additional comments and written questions from members. So with that, this hearing is adjourned.